16-year-old Megan Boswell gave birth to her daughter, Evelyn, on November 21, 2018, in a small U.S. state. After the birth, she moved back in with her father, Tommy, who covered all her expenses, including buying her a car. Despite this support, tensions within the family remained high. Megan frequently caused problems, acting out in typical teenage rebellion. As a result, Tommy relocated her to a trailer owned by a relative, but he continued to pay for everything since Megan refused to take responsibility for her own needs. By December 2019, she had moved out of the trailer to live with her new boyfriend, Hunter Wood. From that point on, they only met once for a fishing trip. During the Christmas holidays, Tommy saw Megan only occasionally and had little contact with his granddaughter, Evelyn. This situation continued until February 18, 2020, when Tommy became concerned and contacted Child Protective Services. On that day, he reported to the Department of Child Services that 1-year-old Evelyn had disappeared under unusual circumstances and that he had not heard from her for a couple of months. Whenever Tommy tried to discuss Evelyn's whereabouts with Megan, she avoided the topic. Initially, she claimed that Evelyn was with her biological father, Eaton Percy, who was in the U.S. Army. However, Tommy suspected that Megan did not have a romantic relationship with Eaton for a while, because their relationship was usually quite ordinary, similar to other relationships in her life. He is unsure if Eaton is Evelyn's father, but Megan insists that Eaton kidnapped the child. Tommy attempted to contact Eaton to inquire about Evelyn's situation, but he was unsuccessful. Tommy did not believe the story about Megan. The more Tommy discussed the matter with her, the less believable her explanations became, and she often avoided answering questions directly. Worried about the situation, Tommy decided to take action. He called the juvenile department to report that he last saw his granddaughter, Evelyn, on Thanksgiving and that she had since gone missing. This report triggered a significant response. Although Megan was aware that Evelyn was missing, she did not report it, which raised concerns about her behavior. After a brief investigation, it became clear that 1-year-old Evelyn was indeed missing. The state police and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation became involved, launching a large-scale search operation. However, they were unable to locate Evelyn in the following days. Despite Tommy's struggles with alcohol addiction, he was a caring father and grandfather, was genuinely worried about Evelyn's well-being. Many believed that the child might be in trouble due to issues with her parents. As the investigation continued, detectives turned their attention to Megan. She maintained that she had left Evelyn in the care of a man named Eaton temporarily, but after that, Evelyn disappeared. Megan claimed that Eaton did not even let her into his home and described their short relationship as abusive and manipulative. She felt scared when he drank and became violent. During her last visit, there was a lengthy conversation between them in which they both agreed that Evelyn would stay with him, but he refused to let Megan see her daughter. After about 20 minutes, Megan was compelled to leave and return to her car, where her boyfriend, Hunter Wood, was waiting for her. This situation raised alarms for several reasons. Firstly, Megan had full custody of Evelyn, and Eaton never contested that custody or made any claims regarding the child. Secondly, although Megan had been avoiding any relationship with Eaton, she insisted on leaving Evelyn with him for several months to help foster a relationship between them, while she was trying to build her own relationship with Hunter. It was important to understand the situation clearly. Before Christmas 2019, Megan mentioned that Eaton had completely stopped communicating with her. He ignored her phone calls and messages. However, closer to the new year, he got drunk and finally contacted her again. Their conversation was harsh, with him threatening her by saying he would come and kill her if she continued calling him. Despite the threats, Megan did not contact the police or report any concerns about her child. She explained that she didn't want to ruin anyone's holiday and planned to address the situation after New Year's. All of this raised suspicions. The discussion with Megan went on for several hours. During this time, her story changed multiple times, but the main point remained the same: Evelyn had been with Eaton since December, and she still had no idea where her daughter was now. Her inconsistent narrative and cold, detached demeanor, with no visible concern for her child, raised alarms. However, there was not enough evidence for an arrest or charges, so Megan was released for the time being. The investigation is now focused on Eaton, the biological father of Evelyn, as authorities seek clarity on the troubling situation. After questioning Megan, law enforcement officers felt conflicted about her. She appeared genuinely distressed and eager to understand her daughter's disappearance, yet there were inconsistencies in her statements and actions that raised concerns. Consequently, the police remained cautious, keeping all possibilities, however grim, in mind without rushing to conclusions. Megan appeared on television, seeking assistance in locating her daughter. Although she hadn't shown much interest in Evelyn's welfare over the past 2 months, she portrayed herself as a concerned mother in front of reporters. With tears in her eyes, she implored anyone with information to come forward, expressing her love and longing for her daughter. Megan even recorded a message intended for Evelyn, hoping the child would see it on TV and return home. However, this display struck detectives as somewhat overdone. They suspected that she was trying to divert suspicion away from herself and was acting for the cameras. Concerns about her grew stronger as investigators spoke with those closest to her. They painted her as a neglectful mother who had little regard for Evelyn. Perhaps due to her young age, it seemed she was unprepared for motherhood. She lacked a close bond with her child and prioritized her personal life over parental responsibilities. Many family members questioned why Megan hadn't reported her daughter missing to the police, especially given the alarming behavior of Eaton, who was believed to have abducted Evelyn. Megan provided a new explanation for her inaction, suggesting that Eaton might have taken Evelyn and that she wanted to avoid drawing attention to the situation in the hope of resolving it quietly. She claimed that involving the police could lead to unnecessary panic and complications. However, this reasoning appeared unconvincing to investigators. While Megan was participating in multiple interviews, the county sheriff searching for Evelyn held a press conference. He quickly realized that the information Megan provided was inconsistent. It was unclear when Evelyn had last been seen. Tommy claimed that he saw his granddaughter on Thanksgiving, while Megan stated that she had given Evelyn to Eaton around December 26, 2019. The nanny, who occasionally cared for Evelyn, stated that she had seen her on December 10 or 11, but after that, Megan unexpectedly stopped using her services. Megan had her reasons for wanting to keep Evelyn with her during the holidays, as she wanted to spend time with family. However, even after the holidays, she did not contact the nanny again. This inconsistency added to the many contradictions that investigators encountered. Detectives attempted to reach Evelyn's biological father, Eaton. Megan claimed that she took her daughter to Texas in February, but Eaton was actually in Louisiana serving in the Army. When detectives managed to speak to Eaton, it became clear that he couldn't take care of Evelyn since he was stationed in another state. He received media attention and was required to give several interviews. He stated that in February 2020, he received multiple phone calls while at Fort Johnson, Louisiana. The Guardianship Service reached out to him to inquire about Evelyn's whereabouts. This caught him off guard because he had no information about her. Later, the police contacted him about an incident involving Evelyn, but he still didn't understand the situation because Megan refused to discuss it with him. The detectives invited Eaton for questioning. He was cooperative, allowing them access to his phone, agreeing to provide DNA samples, and permitting searches of his barracks and car. He confirmed that his only meeting with Evelyn was on Christmas 2019. Megan's claims were shocking to him. She aimed to establish his paternity, believing him to be Evelyn's biological father. Eaton was doubtful but agreed to the DNA test. When detectives informed him about his communications with Megan, he noted that much of the narrative was fabricated since he wasn't even sure if Evelyn was his daughter. He also said he would not take the girl away from Megan, as he was living on a military base and was unable to care for her. Eaton colleagues confirmed that he had never left the service and that Evelyn was not accompanying him. They had never lived together with Megan, and he did not harm Evelyn, despite her claims. They had a brief one-night encounter and never saw each other again. The detectives worked to determine who was lying, and after spending several hours interviewing Eaton, his colleagues, they began to suspect that Megan might be the true liar and manipulator in the situation. After extensive questioning, they ultimately cleared Eaton of suspicion as a potential kidnapper. During the search for Evelyn, several witnesses came forward with information. In particular, details about a silver BMW were linked to individuals who might know Evelyn's whereabouts. This car was located in Wills County, North Carolina, on February 21st. Two individuals, named Angela and William, were arrested for using the car. Angela, who is Megan's mother, stated that she purchased the vehicle, which now belongs to her daughter's boyfriend. However, she did not have any paperwork to verify her ownership. It was later revealed that this silver 2007 BMW was reported stolen in North Carolina. All individuals associated with the vehicle were arrested, but the charges were not related to Evelyn's disappearance. The detectives were taken aback by the information provided by Megan. During a previous interrogation, she had accused Eaton of abducting her daughter and refusing to return her. However, in a subsequent interview, she suddenly changed her story. Megan likely realized that her initial story about Eaton wasn't credible and decided to create a new narrative. She unexpectedly told reporters that an unknown person had kidnapped her daughter, Evelyn. However, just a few minutes later in the same interview, she denied making that claim. Due to these strange actions, detectives arranged to speak with Megan again. During this meeting, she quickly introduced a new version of the incident that hadn't been mentioned before. This time, her mother, Angela, who is 42 years old, was involved in the story. Megan claimed that she had taken her daughter away from Eaton and later met Angela at a cafe. During this meeting, Angela was very aggressive, insisting that she would take Evelyn because she believed Megan couldn't be a proper mother. Megan noted that her relationship with her mother had always been terrible. She described her as vindictive and manipulative, and suspected that Angela took Evelyn out of a desire for revenge. Megan described Angela's behavior toward Evelyn as extremely cruel. In the cafe parking lot, Angela reportedly abandoned Evelyn, which may have caused a head injury. Megan felt powerless to intervene while Angela left with her daughter. She was too afraid to report the incident to the police, hoping it would resolve on its own. During that time, Angela was residing in a trailer park in Virginia. Although law enforcement found Megan's account hard to believe, they could not dismiss it completely. They conducted a search of 3 trailers but found no evidence that Angela had been with a child. The inconsistencies in Megan's statements led the police to doubt her credibility, and they requested that she take a polygraph test, which she declined. Megan claimed she was pregnant and believed the test could harm her unborn child or yield inaccurate results. Meanwhile, Hunter Wood, Megan's boyfriend, wanted to speak with a local news outlet for his own safety. To his surprise, he faced pressure not only from the police but also from the local community. The situation escalated to the point where he couldn't speak to journalists himself. Instead, his father had to intervene. Some townspeople suspected that Hunter might be connected to Evelyn's disappearance, and Megan frequently mentioned him in her already dubious stories. Through his father, Hunter shared that he only had a brief acquaintance with Megan. He characterized their relationship as short, consisting of some flirting and occasional meetings. They first met when Megan applied for a job at a local restaurant owned by Hunter. It was during this time that he met Evelyn for the only time. Later, when Megan's mother came to work, she would always mention that Evelyn was with her biological father, Eaton. She insisted that Eaton take Evelyn, but Hunter never met Eaton and only learned about him through Megan. Since rumors and threats against Hunter on social media, stemming from Megan's lies, began, he felt compelled to shut down both his personal page and the restaurant's social media accounts. Many people began to boycott his restaurant, causing significant harm to his business due to the actions of a disgruntled employee. Hunter desperately wanted to find Evelyn to clear his name and dispel any suspicions, but the situation remained unresolved. As the online harassment continued, Hunter's mental health began to suffer. He moved in with his mother for support during this difficult time, but even that was not enough. Eventually, he was hospitalized for treatment and evaluation, but his condition only worsened there. His father was deeply worried about the toll Megan's lies were taking on him. His father noted that, although there were days when he seemed better, his father often could not even recognize him during visits. Due to these challenges, Hunter was unable to participate in the hearings regarding Evelyn's case that took place later. The police never formally accused him of any crime related to her disappearance. The negativity directed at him stemmed solely from Megan's fabricated claims. A shocking development in the case revealed that a paternity test showed Eaton was not Evelyn's biological father, and the identity of Evelyn's actual father remained a mystery. Megan had been lying from the start of the search for her daughter. Her false information led law enforcement to waste a significant amount of time and resources on an ultimately misguided investigation. As a result of growing suspicions, Megan was arrested on February 25, 2020. At that time, her daughter's whereabouts were still unknown, and detectives had not yet been able to charge her with anything specific regarding the case. Megan faced charges of making false accusations and was held in jail with bail set at $25,000, which her father, Tommy, refused to pay. While in custody, Megan claimed she was pregnant, but later investigations revealed that this claim was also false. With this, Megan became the primary suspect in her daughter's disappearance. Fortunately, she was unable to leave, allowing investigators to intensify their efforts and focus on questioning her. Eventually, these efforts bore fruit, and she finally confessed. Megan stated that at that time, she and Hunter slept in the same bed as Evelyn, and the next morning, they found the baby unresponsive. Fearing accusations, Megan decided to dispose of her daughter. She placed the baby's body in the trash but did not inform the police of its location. It was now clear that Evelyn was deceased, but authorities needed to locate the body to confirm her death. On February 27, a search warrant was issued for the trailer where Megan and Evelyn lived. Forensic experts investigated the area and the trailer, using luminol and ground-penetrating radar to search for hidden spaces in the ground. There were also concerns that the child may have been drowned in a nearby lake. Searches at all these locations, which involved specially trained dogs and a dive team, came up empty. Investigators also examined the property of Tommy, Megan's father, located 5 kilometers from the trailer, but initially found nothing there as well. On March 6, 2020, investigators discovered a horrifying scene in a playhouse on Tommy's property. They found a trash can that had been placed in the wrong location. When the police opened it, they discovered a small child's leg protruding from the can. The girl had been discarded like trash. Her body was positioned vertically. She was tightly wrapped in a fleece blanket and then placed inside a garbage bag with aluminum foil wrapped around her face. She had been thrown away with the household waste. Before her death, the girl had been placed head down in the can and trapped by other items, unable to escape. She suffered a painful death. Contrary to what her mother, Megan, had claimed, her death was not accidental. The cold weather helped preserve the child's remains, and a forensic expert determined that she died from suffocation. Evidence suggested that she had faced physical abuse before her murder. Several bruises in various stages of healing indicated that she had been repeatedly beaten, which could explain the head injury that Megan mentioned. This head injury was allegedly inflicted by Angela, possibly as a precaution to conceal the abuse in case the body was discovered. What began as a search for a missing child turned into a murder investigation. As a result, Megan faced over 10 charges but pleaded not guilty to any of them. During the court hearings for Evelyn's murder, the prosecutor portrayed Megan as a manipulative liar who misled investigators and fabricated inconsistent stories to hide her involvement in the crime. The defense lawyer argued that the incident was an accident, claiming Megan panicked when she realized her child had died in her sleep. While the defense correctly noted that conflicting statements do not prove murder, the courtroom atmosphere was chaotic. The prosecution presented over 30 witnesses familiar with Megan's family, who described her as an irresponsible mother living in a trailer park with her daughter. She neglected to pay bills, taking advantage of her relatives' property while her father resolved all financial issues. Hunter, a witness, expressed concerns about Megan's parenting during a conversation with his father. He remarked that Evelyn appeared unkempt, smelled bad, and was poorly dressed, indicating she hadn't been bathed in a long time. Several other witnesses echoed this sentiment, noting Megan's indifference, which persisted even after her daughter disappeared. She did not participate in the search and showed no genuine concern when questioned about Evelyn. One of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence was Megan's fingerprints on the foil and film used to wrap Evelyn's body. Her fingerprints were also found on the trash can and in the playhouse where Evelyn's body was discovered. Despite this, the defense attorney contended that the prosecution lacked direct evidence. The lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial, suggesting that Megan's fingerprints were from previous visits to her father's home. However, Megan admitted to disposing of her daughter's body in that manner. Megan spun a web of lies that hindered the search for Evelyn. It was suggested that Megan viewed Evelyn as an obstacle to her relationship with her new, successful boyfriend, Hunter Wood. The defense attorney argued that Evelyn's death was an accident and attributed Megan's actions to her fear and inexperience as a young mother. However, the prosecution presented stronger evidence regarding the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's death. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury found Megan guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, resulting in 3 murder convictions. The court then held one final discussion to determine her punishment. Megan's mother, Angela, attended the hearing and spoke to the jury in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. Although she understood that Megan would likely face a life sentence, she was hopeful that Megan could still qualify for parole. Angela described the struggles that she and her husband, Tommy, faced, illustrating the difficult environment in which their daughter, Megan, was raised. Angela claimed that Megan frequently witnessed her parents using alcohol and even banned substances, creating an unhealthy and, at times, dangerous home atmosphere. Tommy had once been convicted of assault. Megan's issues at home began when she was around 7 years old, leading her to live with her grandparents for a significant period. By 2019, Angela was imprisoned, and Megan was placed in a foster home while still attending high school. After moving to the city, Angela was unable to send Megan to school due to a lack of time. This made Angela believe that Megan's difficult behavior stemmed from never having experienced the care of a loving mother. Later, Megan's adoptive mother testified, revealing that when Megan joined their family, she was in poor condition, tired, wearing dirty clothes, and having unmanageable hair. Megan also exhibited signs of emotional distress. She appeared fearful and had visible bruises. At that time, she was pregnant. Megan took several weeks to recover. Despite her hardships, she aimed to be a good mother. Having cared for her younger siblings, she applied that knowledge to caring for her baby, Evelyn. She ensured that she attended all of Evelyn's doctor appointments. However, the nanny who worked with them expressed concerns during the trial, noting that Evelyn had a severe diaper rash that she had never seen before. This situation arose shortly before Evelyn went missing. The home environment was often chaotic and unsanitary, and, according to the nanny, Megan neglected Evelyn's hygiene when she was alone. After Angela testified, the jury recommended a life sentence for Megan with the possibility of parole. The prosecutor argued for a life sentence without the chance for parole. Ultimately, Megan was sentenced to life in prison but could be eligible for parole after 51 years. This outcome sparked mixed reactions among those who cared about Evelyn. Some felt it was a just decision, while many believed that the harm caused by Megan's actions would leave lasting scars on others for a lifetime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Noreen Boyle. John Boyle Jr. is a chiropractor in Mansfield, Ohio. He has a successful practice, which is considered one of the best in the state. John and his wife, Noreen Boyle, have been married for over 20 years and have 2 children. In 1989, their eldest son, Collier, turned 11. They also adopted a 3-year-old daughter from Taiwan named Elizabeth. Noreen was born into a working-class family in Philadelphia and worked as a dental hygienist. She supported John through his schooling in the early years of their marriage, but after Collier was born, she became a stay-at-home mom. Thanks to John's successful career, the family enjoys a comfortable life. Their children attend private schools, travel, shop, and experience the World Cup without financial worries. Although the couple appears to be a model family from the outside, John has a disturbing personality. He was often abusive to his wife and displayed controlling behavior. Furthermore, he was unfaithful. John frequently pursued relationships with other women, a fact known to his friends, family, and Noreen. For years, she tolerated his behavior in an attempt to preserve the marriage for the sake of their children, despite being aware of his infidelity and his constant pursuit of younger women. Whenever she confronted him about his affairs, he reacted violently. In general, John could not tolerate any criticism of himself. Noreen's son, Collier, also felt the effects of his father's behavior from a young age. However, this situation could not last forever. In December 1989, Noreen filed for divorce. John did not want to end their marriage because he was happy with his family life and relationships. In an attempt to save their marriage, he planned to move his family and private practice to Erie, Pennsylvania, nearly 2 hours away from their old home. Their situation was not as promising as he had hoped. John persuaded Noreen to stay for New Year's and to continue working on their problems afterward. The family celebrated the holidays at their old home, with John's mother in attendance. He asked his mother to babysit the children because he planned to leave again after midnight when everyone was in bed. Later, Noreen and John argued on New Year's Eve. Elizabeth, the youngest daughter in the family, was confused by the situation, and Collier was worried. John's mother put Collier to bed, and just as he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly heard Noreen's loud scream, followed by 2 thuds, as if something had hit the wall, and then silence. Afterward, someone walked around the house for a long time, even opening the door and standing in the doorway for a while. Collier was so frightened that he pretended to be asleep and stayed that way until morning. Despite his fear, 11-year-old Collier got out of bed early on January 1. When everything was quiet, he explored the house. His mother was missing, but John seemed to be either awake or not yet asleep. Collier asked his father where his mother was. John replied that she had left after their argument. He assured Collier that she would be back soon, and John's mother agreed with him. The boy waited for Noreen to return, but days passed without her. Shelley Bowden, Noreen's best friend, had been in close contact with her, especially during her divorce. Shelley was quick to criticize John's claims about Noreen's disappearance. She had planned to meet Noreen for lunch just after New Year's to discuss important matters, but Noreen never showed up and ignored her calls. This behavior was completely out of character for the Noreen she knew, and Shelley worried that something was wrong. Shelley repeatedly stressed that Noreen would never abandon her child under any circumstances. Out of concern, Shelley reported Noreen missing to the police. However, the police dismissed her concerns and reminded her that adults have the right to go wherever they want, without informing anyone. Shelley argued that Noreen was a responsible woman who would never leave her child, especially a 3-year-old who needed her. Collier picked up the phone book, found the police station number, and reported that something was wrong with his mother. The police responded quickly and went to Noreen's house. When they arrived, they immediately noticed that the boy looked scared and desperate for help. Unfortunately, they were unable to communicate effectively, but the police could see the fear in Collier's eyes, especially when he glanced at his father. When John asked the police who had contacted them, they did not reveal the truth, lying that one of Noreen's relatives had called. However, the police accepted John's explanation that she had simply left after an argument, and everyone believed it. Noreen was reported missing, and weeks passed without anyone questioning John's claim that she had left. However, Collier could not believe that his mother would abandon him. After hearing Noreen's relative's story, the police returned to Noreen's house. They searched every room thoroughly, but found no alarming evidence. Forensic experts examined the house and found no signs of foul play. Despite this, the police were able to speak to Collier, who recounted what he had heard on New Year's Eve, including Noreen's suspicious screams and banging on the walls. There was strong suspicion that John was involved in his wife's disappearance. Collier's sister, Elizabeth, who was 3 years old at the time, may have witnessed the incident. She told the police that she saw her father hit her mother on the head, then put her on the floor and wrapped her up like a snowman. However, due to her age, her testimony was not considered in the investigation. Soon after, a pregnant young woman named Sherry Lee Campbell moved into their home, replacing his wife. John claimed that Sherry was not pregnant with his child and that they had only met after his wife had gone missing. He said that he had taken pity on Sherry and offered to let her stay. He also mentioned serious problems in his marriage and stated that Sherry would leave when his wife returned. While investigating the missing persons case, the police discovered revealing information about John's personal life. It turned out that his relationship with Sherry had been going on for much longer than he had admitted. There was a strong possibility that she was pregnant with his child, casting doubt on his story. Despite alarming details that raised suspicions, no concrete evidence was ever found, and Noreen remains missing. Furthermore, the theory that she ran away seems implausible. She had not made any purchases, used any credit cards, or contacted her children or relatives for weeks, which was highly suspicious. While examining the house and piecing together the events of Noreen's final days before her disappearance, the police learned that Noreen had been suffering from John's betrayal and infidelity for years. Sherry was the one having an affair with John, which drove Noreen away from her family. Sherry claimed that she only started dating John after his wife went missing, which was clearly untrue. Collier sought help because he was afraid of staying with his father, whom he believed was a murderer. While searching John's car, Collier discovered a photo of Sherry taken before New Year's. He considered showing it to the police. The photo was taken in front of a new house, so they decided to visit that location. Unfortunately, John refused to let them in, and they needed evidence to obtain a search warrant. More than 2 weeks after Noreen went missing, the police began to take the case more seriously, as her prolonged silence raised suspicions. Police discovered John's banking activities. They discovered that during the time Noreen was reported missing, John had made suspicious transactions. John rented a drill and purchased cleaning supplies from a hardware store, as well as quick-dry cement. He also frequently filled up gas in Erie, possibly during his visits to the new home. The investigation has now shifted its focus to the new house, as no evidence of a crime was found at the John family's old home. Collier said he noticed a ring on Sherry's finger that belonged to the boy's mother. He told his father this directly. The situation became more concerning when John told Collier that they were going to a neighboring state for fun the next day. He suggested a trip to a forest in the Highlands, which sounded very ominous and raised fears for the boy's safety. When the police arrived at the newly renovated house in Erie, it was clear that John had put a lot of effort into both the interior and exterior. However, the investigation focused on finding clues related to Noreen's disappearance and rescuing a boy from his father. The police searched the house meticulously, as such environments could hide bodies or evidence of a crime. The most intriguing discovery was in the basement. In a nearly empty room that was being renovated, they found a new carpet. When the rug was pulled back, they discovered a rectangle of freshly poured concrete. This anomaly caught the attention of the police, prompting them to investigate further by removing the concrete. While removing the concrete, they detected the smell of a decomposing human body. After completely removing the floor, they found a makeshift grave containing the body of a woman. Everyone immediately believed that this was Noreen's body. In the 3 weeks since her disappearance, the body had decomposed significantly. The condition of the body was so poor that dental records were needed for identification. Collier did not have to go with his father into the woods, where the boy could have been in danger. The police found the necessary evidence, ensuring that the boy was taken to Child Protective Services, where he would be safe. However, Noreen's tragic death was a huge shock to Collier. The boy had a deep bond with his mother. Noreen was not only his mother, but also his best friend. After discovering Noreen's body in her new home in Erie, the police found an expensive watch on her, which also served as a means of identification. Noreen's relatives noticed that her wedding ring was missing. According to a forensic expert, Noreen died between the night of December 31 and January 1. The police interviewed potential witnesses, especially neighbors who may have seen something unusual. A key witness was a man who lived next door and was awake from midnight to 4 a.m. on the night of the murder. He reported observing suspicious activity at John's house. Around 3 a.m., he saw John arrive with large bags. In the days that followed, John returned to the house frequently, working for hours and picking up heavy bags, which he then loaded into his car. The police suspected that the bags contained soil and construction debris, possibly related to the creation of a grave in the concrete floor. Interestingly, Sherry was wearing a ring that was identical to Noreen's missing ring. Collier could easily recall the ring his mother had worn, especially since there was a memorable story associated with the gift his mother had shared with him. This made him instantly recognize the ring on Sherry's hand. The police later learned that John had taken the ring from Noreen to give to his new partner, Sherry. Upon learning of this, Sherry was furious and immediately ended her relationship with John. The police then questioned John's mother, who had been with the children on the night of the incident. She claimed that she had not heard anything suspicious and vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Collier recalled an argument between his parents that he had heard before falling asleep. He was suddenly awakened by a terrifying scream and a loud bang on the wall, followed by silence. The police determined that John had inflicted a serious head injury on his wife. He then wrapped her head in a plastic bag, presumably to conceal any blood at the crime scene. John then went to check on his son, Collier. Collier vividly remembered his father standing in the doorway, staring at him. During this time, the boy pretended to be asleep, instinctively sensing danger. Collier now looks back on that moment with horror, wondering what his father might have done if he had realized that the boy was awake and had heard everything. Despite John's meticulous planning, he failed to create a credible story to explain his wife's disappearance. John cleaned the house thoroughly, leaving no forensic evidence of the crime. No traces of Noreen's DNA were found in the vehicle used to transport the body. Clearly, John was meticulous in his actions. When John struck his wife on the head, he avoided breaking the skin, resulting in no blood. He quickly covered her head with a bag, indicating intentionality. The pickup truck left no evidence, and not even the plastic bag covering her head left any fingerprints. Killers often leave traces on objects they forget to clean, but John was meticulous. He ensured that the entire crime scene was cleaned up after Noreen went missing. The police discovered circumstantial evidence. 2 days before his wife's death, John rented a drill, indicating that he was planning the murder. During the same period, he purchased cleaning supplies and quick-drying cement. John loaded his pickup truck with construction debris, waste, and soil, and drove to a location where he could dispose of it without restrictions. This decision turned out to be a serious mistake. When the police investigated and analyzed the debris, they confirmed that the concrete came from the basement of John's house. He had a motive to get rid of his troubled wife, Noreen, without going through a costly divorce. The investigation uncovered strong evidence against John, and Collier, who was only 12 years old, became a key witness. He understood that he would have to testify against his own father in court, which would greatly strengthen the prosecution's case. The prosecutor's office indicated that John could potentially face a prison sentence. For Collier, meanwhile, the situation posed difficult challenges. He struggled with the stigma of being known as the son of a murderer. Collier harbors resentment towards his father for taking away his mother through his terrible actions. John's defense team developed strategies to challenge the prosecution's case. They focused on undermining the prosecution's methods, arguing that many rules were ignored when interacting with child witnesses. Notably, no adults were present during many of the interviews, which the defense claimed was illegal. Furthermore, the defense believed that the police may have influenced the child to provide information that would incriminate his father in his mother's death, thus violating due process. John attempted to create a strong alibi to prove his innocence. He even convinced his brother to lie to the police, claiming that Noreen had called him. This made the investigation even more difficult for the police. The lie was exposed when it became clear that Noreen had died before that date. Despite this false testimony, John's brother did not face any charges. John's reputation as a successful chiropractor helped him maintain a positive image in the community. He was seen as a family man and a good father. He and Noreen had adopted a baby girl, and John was ready to have more children. At the time of the murder, Sherry Lee Campbell was pregnant and was able to prove that John was the father. Throughout the investigation, many questions arose about Sherry. Did she know about John's plan to kill his wife, or was she involved in the crime? These suspicions were fueled by her previous involvement in a real estate scam. A real estate broker reported seeing a young woman who looked like Sherry with Dr. John. However, the police found no evidence linking her to the crime or indicating that she knew about John's murderous intentions. She testified against him in court and cut off all contact with him afterward. Nevertheless, some people still believe that she may have had a role in the events that occurred. John's legal team presented their own arguments against the case. They identified errors in the autopsy report and even tried to argue that the body found in the basement was not Noreen's, but that of someone else who had been buried there earlier. However, the results of subsequent examinations confirmed that it was indeed Noreen's body, reinforcing the police's belief in John's guilt. As the jury deliberated, the atmosphere became tense. John Boyle Jr. was convicted of the premeditated murder of Noreen Boyle, and due to aggravating circumstances, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His lawyers subsequently appealed several times. In 2010, John requested a review of his sentence and sought clemency. Initially, the request was denied, but it was later granted, allowing him the opportunity for early release after 20 years. John's defense team continued to fight for him even after his 2020 parole hearing. For nearly 30 years he had denied killing his wife, but he eventually changed his story. John admitted to Noreen's death, but it was clear that he had been dishonest. His real intention was to have his sentence reduced and go free. He showed little remorse, claiming that he had pushed his wife in a fit of rage, causing her to accidentally fall and hit her head, resulting in her death. He refused to discuss other actions that suggested he had planned the crime. As a result, his request for parole was denied, and he remained in prison. John's family shunned Collier, and Noreen's relatives were unable to adopt the boy because they were too old. He was adopted by a caring family in Canada. As he grew older, Collier changed his last name. He initially worked as a magazine model before becoming a successful cameraman in Los Angeles. He eventually teamed up with a renowned director and produced a documentary in 2018 that recounted the story of his mother, Noreen Boyle's death, as well as his fight for freedom and the horror of his father's crimes. While making the film, Collier visited his father in prison nearly 30 years after John was convicted of murder. During their meeting, John claimed that he had accidentally killed his wife during an argument when she lunged at him with a knife, and he instinctively pushed her away. Collier did not believe his father's story, but chose to forgive him. Despite this, John still harbored resentment toward Collier and did not consider him part of his family. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case, the case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. We will explore the tragic story of Cassie Jo Stoddart, a high school senior from Pocatello, Idaho, whose murder was influenced by the movie, Scream. Let's go back to 2006, when the Scream franchise was at its peak. Even though the first film was released in 1996, long before Cassie's murder, Cassie was an honor student at her high school in Pocatello. She attended classes with her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, and her friends, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, and they often spent their free time together. Cassie was a beautiful young girl with long, flowing dark hair, embodying both beauty and intelligence. In a 2016 interview with Idaho Magazine, Cassie's brother Andrew Stoddart described her as artistic, with a passion for drawing and music. She was a great role model and a typical girl. Cassie's classmates and friends, Brian and Tori, were very interested in the horror movie Scream and other similar films. They also enjoyed making their own videos, with Brian often filming Cassie. Eventually, Brian and Tori began recording discussions about murders. In one recording, Brian said, "We've already found a victim, and maybe it's our girl. You know, we need a sacrifice, and we have to go for it. She will be the first on the list. She'll be all alone in a big dark house." This particular video was filmed on September 2, 2006, and the audio was later found on a videotape that was given to the police, along with other evidence for the murder case. Brian's lawyer argued that this tape should be disregarded since the friends were merely creating a horror film. That night, Cassie was supposed to stay home to care for her aunt and uncle's pets while they were away on business. She invited her boyfriend Matt over to watch movies and keep her company to avoid feeling bored and lonely. Cassie's mother had prohibited her from bringing guests over, but she still told Matt to come. Later on, Brian and Tori showed up, even though she hadn't invited them. They all chatted together and took her uncle's dogs for a walk to keep them calm. To minimize noise, Cassie eventually locked the dogs in a room, and the boys started goofing around. At one point, Brian and Tori decided to leave the house where Matt and Cassie were and go to the movie theater instead of watching Kill Bill 2. According to court records from the 6th Judicial District Court of Idaho, they got into Tori's red car and drove away. They stopped alongside the road to park, then got out to change into dark pants, shirts, gloves, and white masks. Both of them also grabbed large knives. Afterward, they drove back and parked near the house again. Dressed in their costumes and armed with knives, they walked down the driveway toward the house. To enter, they broke a basement window. Once inside, Brian and Tori began making noise by stomping and banging, trying to lure Cassie and Matt downstairs to scare them. They created chaos by throwing objects and breaking things. Then, they found the circuit box and switched off the lights in the house. After some time, they turned the lights back on, but Cassie and Matt still did not come downstairs. Meanwhile, they heard that Matt's mother had arrived to take him home. At 10:30 p.m., Matt started to feel uneasy, claiming that something strange was happening with the lights in the house. His mother suggested that Cassie spend the night at their place, but Cassie declined, saying she needed to take the dogs out early. Matt left with his mother, leaving Cassie alone. Once he was gone, the guys turned off the electricity again and went back upstairs. At the top of the stairs, Brian opened a closet door to make noise and scare Cassie. Meanwhile, the dogs were growling behind a door in the room as Brian and Tori entered the living room, where Cassie was lying on the couch. When she saw them, she jumped up and asked who they were. Tori moved in front of Brian and approached Cassie, who shouted that she wasn't scared of them and could handle them herself. Brian heard Cassie's screams and saw Tori raise a knife and attack her multiple times. She collapsed to the floor, making a gurgling sound. Tori turned to Brian and said, "I know what I did. We have to kill her." He then stabbed Cassie several more times. "I just killed Cassie. This isn't a joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I watched her lifeless body fall. I killed her." It all felt surreal to Brian, but everything happened so quickly. "We need to act fast," he said to Tori as they were in the car. Tori and Brian were celebrating, shouting, "We did it! It was so easy." The group in Tori's car visited his house but didn't stay long. They first entered the garage, where they took blue garbage bags. After removing their costumes, they packed the costumes and knives into the bags and changed into pre-prepared street clothes. They also grabbed a bottle of liquid and placed everything in the back seat of Tori's car before leaving the garage. On their way, they bought matches and drove to Black Rock Canyon. There, they went down a trail to try to burn the bag containing the costumes and knives. However, the liquid wasn't very flammable, so the items wouldn't catch fire. As a result, Tori and Brian dug a hole and buried everything, covering it with branches. Afterward, they drove around the area for a while before returning to Tori's house to watch a movie. Cassie's aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank Contreras, returned on September 24. When she hadn't heard from her daughter at the expected time and hadn't received a call, Cassie's mother went to their house soon after. Frank, Cassie's uncle, came out to meet her mother and wouldn't let her inside because Cassie's body had been found on the living room floor, with dried blood around it. The police were called and they advised not to touch anything. When the officers arrived, they took the body for examination and began their investigation. They discovered that the intruders had broken a window to enter through the basement, which was in disarray, and the electrical panel was open, raising further questions. There were 2 Dobermans locked in separate rooms. If they had been nearby, they would have prevented anyone from getting close to the girl. This raises the question of why Cassie locked them up, as a stranger would not have been able to do so. The autopsy showed that Cassie died from multiple stab wounds, 26 in total, with at least 9 being fatal. These wounds impacted her heart, lungs, and liver, leaving her with no chance of survival. It was determined that 2 different knives were used in the attack, suggesting the involvement of 2 assailants. There was no evidence of abuse assault, and her death occurred overnight between September 22 and 23. The first person questioned was Cassie's boyfriend, Matt. He explained that on the evening of September 22, he was at Cassie's house when Brian and Tori arrived. However, after an hour, they grew bored and left. On September 23, Matt attempted to contact Cassie by phone but received no response. He was unable to visit her house to check on her because he lacked transportation. His family had only 1 car, which his mother took to work. Matt found out about Cassie's murder on Sunday, September 24, when Cassie's mother called him to ask what he had done with her daughter. Matt thought that Brian and Tori treated Cassie well and might have even had feelings for her, as they sometimes flirted. During a detailed interrogation with Tori on September 24 at his home, where his parents were present, Tori stated that he and Brian had gone to a party with Cassie and Matt. However, since no one else showed up, they decided to leave her and Matt alone, and they went to the movie. When asked for more details, Tori could not recall any specifics about the movie they claimed to have watched, only mentioning that after the movie, he and Brian returned home. The following day, the police interviewed Brian with his mother present. Brian's version of events that evening closely matched Tori's. They left Cassie to go to the cinema, but like Tori, Brian couldn't recall the plot of the movie they supposedly watched 2 days earlier. He expressed distress upon hearing about Cassie's death and had trouble accepting that she was gone. When officers spoke with the cinema attendant, she confirmed that neither Tori nor Brian had actually been to the movie, as she recognized them and would have remembered their presence. This prompted the police to take a closer look at the friends. On September 25, the detective interviewed an anonymous individual at a high school, which revealed the following information. Tori and Brian had a strong fascination with knives, guns, and horror movies. They were so passionate about these films that they even wrote a screenplay centered around a murder. The witness reported that Cassie had asked her friends to film her for this project, and about 2 months prior, Tori had allowed Cassie to read the script. Tori expressed his enjoyment of movies like Scream and Friday the 13th, and he owned a collection of knives stored in his bedroom closet. Additionally, he had created a glove similar to the one seen in A Nightmare on Elm Street. The witness also noted that Tori bragged about being capable of committing the perfect crime, attributing this confidence to his extensive viewing of murder films and his habit of taking notes on evading capture. At school, Tori would often joke around by pretending to hit others and simulating throat-cutting gestures. On September 22, 2006, Tori had invited this witness to Cassie's party, but she declined. Furthermore, the police found out that Tori had been in love with Cassie for the past 2 to 3 years. On September 27, 2006, Brian and Tori were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Although they were minors at the time, they were charged as adults. During the interrogation, Tori broke down in tears and confessed that Brian was responsible for the crime. In response, Brian accused Tori, claiming Brian was present at the scene but did not take part. He insisted that their intention was only to scare Cassie, not to kill her. However, Brian later admitted that he had struck Cassie at Tori's command. He also led investigators to the locations where they burned their costumes and buried the unburned items. The police excavated the area and discovered 2 masks, clothing, shoes, and knives. Tori and Brian had removed their socks and buried everything since the clothing and shoes were covered in blood. They had planned to change outfits beforehand. Most notably, the police found a videotape at the bottom of the pit that provided undeniable evidence of the crime. The 40-minute recording showed Tori and Brian painting masks they had bought from a store. Later in the video, they recorded a message to future serial killers, wishing them success and discussing their plans to target Cassie and her boyfriend, Matt. Fortunately, Matt's mother insisted he go home that day, which ultimately saved him. The tape also featured an interview that Tori conducted with Cassie and Matt on the afternoon of September 22, during which he indicated on screen that the two would soon be killed. Additionally, during a search of Tori's house, the police found a red notebook containing notes about planning a murder, as well as a list of 20 people that Brian and Tori intended to kill over the next 2 years, targeting one person each month. As investigators looked into the individuals on the list, they discovered that it included teachers, friends, girlfriends, and even a relative. The police were startled to uncover the connections these potential victims had with Tori and Brian, as most of these relationships appeared normal. Many people were shocked to learn that they were being targeted for murder. It's important to note that Tori and Brian did not fit the mold of typical victims of bullying or abuse. They seemed perfectly normal. Brian Draper was found guilty on April 17, 2007, and Tori Adamczyk was found guilty on June 8, 2007. On August 21, 2007, both received mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, and an additional 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder. They began serving their sentences in a correctional facility in Idaho. The verdict upset the families of both Tori and Brian, who had hoped for leniency due to their young ages. Tori's relatives were especially outraged. In 2010, the attorneys for Brian and Tori filed separate appeals to the state Supreme Court, but both were denied. Tori's family continued to seek changes to his sentence for over a decade. Ultimately, in 2017, Tori Adamczyk lost the final court case that could have affected his sentence, ensuring that both Tori and Brian would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Edmonds. Bianca Edmonds was the second of 4 children, with 2 brothers and 1 sister. When Bianca was young, her father took a job with a mining company, which kept him away from home for long periods. This created tension in the family, as her mother wanted him to spend more time with them, but he could not quit his job. This eventually led to their separation. Bianca's mother later remarried another man, who adopted Bianca and her siblings. As a result, Bianca was often referred to by her stepfather's surname, Edmonds. This did not bother the family or Edmonds much, as she had little contact with her biological father in her early years. However, as she grew older and finished school, she reconnected with her biological father, and they developed a close relationship. After completing her secondary education, Bianca joined the Australian Navy. Unfortunately, a year later, she injured her back during training, which led to her being discharged for health reasons. After recovering, she worked various jobs in the retail industry but found it difficult to hold down a permanent position. In 2007, she gave birth to her first son after starting a relationship with a man. However, the man was not interested in family life, and they eventually broke up. By this time, Bianca had matured and knew what she wanted in life. She longed for reliable support and a comfortable lifestyle. In early 2012, shortly after turning 26, she met Michael Capo-Siena, who was 35. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and they got married that same year. At the end of 2012, Bianca became pregnant again, and on June 3, 2013, she gave birth to a son. Although their relationship progressed quickly, it was toxic from the start. Michael often complained that Bianca was too controlling. The couple argued frequently, and shortly after the birth of their son, they decided to divorce. In early 2015, Bianca met Glenn Cassidy, a 48-year-old man, through a dating app. As usual, Bianca acted quickly. She appreciated Glenn's gentle nature, which suited her desire to be proactive in the relationship. Their initial online flirtation quickly turned into a real-life meeting and intimacy. Although Glenn was 20 years older than Bianca and was married with 2 children from a previous marriage, their similar life experiences seemed to help them connect quickly. In February 2016, they got married. Meanwhile, Bianca faced a number of personal challenges, most notably a custody battle with her ex-husband, Michael. Bianca's second husband, Michael, was initially not very involved in their son's life and often refused to see him. However, things changed when Michael entered a new relationship, achieved financial stability, and decided to spend more time with his son, who was then 9 months old. In March 2014, Michael requested visitation rights for his son. This led to a number of disputes, with Bianca accusing her ex-husband of being toxic and unfit to be a father. Michael decided to file a lawsuit against Bianca. By August 2015, after several court hearings, he was granted visitation rights, but with strict restrictions. He could only see his son in a neutral location under supervision, with 2-hour visits in Melbourne, a 2-hour drive from where Michael lived. This arrangement caused significant inconvenience for Bianca. She was unhappy that Michael was still interfering in their son's life, and she wanted to sever the relationship but could not find a way to do so. Unfortunately, the situation did not improve. Michael decided to take legal action again, seeking to increase the time and frequency of his visitation with his son and to remove the supervision requirement. This frustrated Bianca even more, leading to numerous arguments that sometimes escalated into physical confrontations. Michael's girlfriend described Bianca as a toxic person who tried to limit Michael's communication with his son out of anger. She said that Michael had changed his mind and wanted to reconnect with the child, and that he was legally entitled to do so. Michael's girlfriend portrayed him as a devoted family man with a kind personality. On the other hand, Glenn, who was in a relationship with Bianca, viewed Michael as a toxic and cruel person who could pose a threat to his son. Bianca frequently expressed her concerns about Michael to Glenn, claiming that he had threatened to kidnap her son. Bianca also attempted to manipulate her son psychologically by telling him that Michael, his biological father, was a bad person, but this tactic did not have the desired effect. Instead, she began to manipulate Glenn, using him as her main tool. Tensions in the family escalated, largely due to Bianca's provocations. She refused to be intimate with her husband unless he agreed to the idea of her ex-husband Michael's death. Over time, their relationship deteriorated. Bianca began to pressure and belittle Glenn, calling him a coward for not dealing with Michael and for not helping her. Initially, Glenn took her words as a joke, but over time, he began to seriously consider killing Michael due to the constant pressure he faced when his wife suggested planning the action. Glenn had written a fairly basic list of important points by hand. He wanted to shoot his enemy and then find a way to dispose of the body. In addition, Glenn's notes were full of spelling errors, highlighting his difficulties with writing. Bianca had received support from her husband, and she prepared him to commit the crime. Glenn desperately wanted to have a child with her, and her manipulation regarding intimacy worked. The couple, who had difficulty conceiving, shared their struggles with their friends. Bianca cleverly convinced Glenn that after Michael died, he would definitely have an heir. After this plan was documented, they began to prepare and execute it step by step. They searched for the best location for an ambush and created a map of the area where Michael lived with his new girlfriend. Bianca's knowledge of the layout of Michael's house helped her create a detailed plan, including the locations of doors and windows. They were very thorough in their preparations. They even mapped out the locations of streetlights and nearby houses with barking dogs. Bianca was eager to proceed and urged that Michael be killed as soon as possible. However, each time they set a date, things went wrong, causing delays. Glenn visited Michael's house several times to assess the entrances and exits of various streets. During these visits, he would call Bianca to discuss any problems that were interfering with their plans. He often expressed frustration that Michael was not home at the scheduled time, as he seemed to be working late or socializing with friends. The attackers communicated in code and referred to the area around Michael's house as the workplace. Glenn often stayed late, waiting for the target of the attack. Despite Bianca's encouragement, Glenn remained anxious and uncertain. Bianca employed her main tactic, intimacy, assuring him that once Michael was dead, he would have everything he wanted. Later, for reasons unknown, the police obtained a recording of their conversation. In response, Glenn installed a call recording app on his cell phone, possibly suspecting that he was being manipulated and wanting to protect himself in case things went wrong. Regardless, this did not absolve him of guilt for the shooting that followed. While carrying out this heinous plan, Bianca was supposed to be on vacation with Glenn's mother. The destination was on the other side of Australia, likely chosen to provide Bianca with an alibi that would convince the police of her innocence. On March 11, 2016, she prepared for the trip and spoke to Glenn about their plans. The next day, March 12, Glenn drove 170 kilometers to Michael's house. At 12:23 p.m., he sent another text message, expressing his love for her and speaking angrily about Michael. Around 1 p.m. that same day, Glenn drove to the road leading to Michael's house. He reiterated his love for Bianca and his willingness to carry out his plan. During this time, Glenn set up an ambush, positioning himself to see the front door of the house. When Michael and Silvana Silva, his girlfriend, arrived home, they settled in to watch a movie. At 7:18 p.m., Silvana looked out the window and saw a man get out of his car and walk toward their house empty-handed. Recognizing him, she told Michael, feeling confused. This was odd since they lived far from Bianca and her new husband, leaving them puzzled as to how he had gotten there. Glenn noticed some people walking by, then returned to his car, presumably to assess the area and collect his thoughts. At 7:27 p.m., he got out of his car again, this time carrying a large white bag. After checking around and confirming that no one was nearby, he approached Michael's front door at 7:30 p.m. Glenn knocked on the door, and his sudden appearance at such a late hour made Michael nervous. He went into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife for protection. Silvana opened the door slightly and kept it on the chain. A brief conversation ensued, in which Michael told Glenn that he could not help Glenn. Glenn then held out his hand as if to say goodbye, and Michael, thinking it was safe, shook his hand. This turned out to be a grave mistake. Glenn grabbed Michael's hand, forcing him into the house. A struggle broke out as Glenn attempted to pull out a handgun and aim it at Michael's head. Michael fought back violently with the knife, striking Glenn several times. Tragically, a shot rang out, killing Michael instantly. Glenn then pointed the gun at Silvana, apparently intending to eliminate her as a witness. However, he had only loaded one bullet into the gun, and when he pulled the trigger, the handgun clicked but did not fire. In a fit of rage, he struck Silvana with his gun, knocking her unconscious. Glenn may have intended to kill her, but after the first blow, he collapsed to the floor, bleeding heavily from a stab wound. By 9:32 p.m., the situation was over. Silvana regained consciousness and found both men dead. She called emergency services, reporting that she had been attacked and that her fiancé had died. She had only suffered a minor concussion from the blow to her head and was weakened by blood loss. When the police arrived, they found a chaotic scene. Silvana gave a detailed account of the events, but as the sole survivor, she became the prime suspect. The police quickly determined that Silvana had nothing to do with the murder. They located Glenn's car parked on the street across from the house. Inside, they found his untouched lunch of fried chicken and green beans. A database check confirmed that the car belonged to Glenn. Police reviewed surveillance camera footage and accessed Glenn's mobile phone. The case was complicated from the start, taking 3 months for police to identify Bianca as the mastermind behind the attack. She apparently believed she would escape, so she was shocked when the police arrived at her home. Bianca Edmonds was arrested in December 2016 and taken to the police station for questioning, where she became hysterical. She acted as if Glenn was making things up and tried to convince him that he had not made a terrible mistake. However, he ignored her warnings and went ahead with his plan while she was away. Bianca claimed that her boyfriend was furious with Michael's behavior and that he was going to take their son away. According to Bianca, Glenn wanted to spend more time with the child. Although Glenn was not the boy's biological father, he had long wanted a child. The police knew this was a lie. Evidence from Glenn's phone confirmed their suspicions. The phone contained saved text messages and recorded calls detailing the planned crime. The police uncovered a wealth of information about the murder plot that had been in the works for months. In her defense, Bianca presented the last text message Glenn had sent her, in which he expressed his love for her and his hatred for Michael. She claimed that this text message made her aware of the impending attack, which she felt powerless to prevent. However, the police quickly noticed a major problem with the notes Glenn had written about the murder plan. They were full of spelling errors. In contrast, the text message Bianca received was perfectly written, too perfectly, and it resembled her own writing style. This led the police to suspect that she had sent the text messages from Glenn's phone to create a false narrative. Bianca denied any involvement in the crime and claimed she knew nothing about it. Despite the strong case against Bianca, the police did not have enough evidence to charge her at the time. She dismissed the charges and denied any involvement in the murder. As a result, she was released, and the investigation continued. During this time, Bianca became bored and returned to Tinder in search of new dates. Just 3 weeks after Glenn's death, she met a man who had just been released from prison on parole. He had a history of violent crime, including the murder of his first wife by slitting her throat in front of their 6-year-old son. Early in their relationship, Bianca informed him that her third husband, Glenn, had died of cancer just weeks after they were to marry. Bianca was pregnant but unfortunately lost the baby in an accident. Her new boyfriend later discovered Glenn and Michael online. He confronted her about the incident, and she revealed that she had planned the murder but insisted that Glenn should not die. She explained that she was too scared to share this with him when they first met, worried that he would not want to continue their relationship. Bianca also admitted to sending text messages from her husband's phone to mislead the investigation. She expressed deep regret for Glenn's death, explaining that she only intended to get rid of Michael. Her motive was fear that he might gain custody of their son. Following Bianca's confession, she became panicked and expressed fear of being caught by the police. Her boyfriend reported her statements to the police. In April 2018, Bianca was questioned again. Despite her boyfriend's testimony, she continued to deny sending the text messages, claiming that she had never seen any maps of Michael's house and denying any involvement in any plans to kill her ex-husband. The police informed her that her fingerprints had been found on the handgun used in the shooting. She was initially unable to respond to this information but continued to deny that custody issues were a motive for the crime. When the police recounted her boyfriend's account, she admitted that she could not remember the conversation. During this time, Bianca suffered from depression after the loss of her child, which she attributed to her mental health and the effects of her antidepressants. Unfortunately, the police determined that they did not have enough evidence to arrest her and were forced to release her. This situation continued until June 2019. Meanwhile, the police had gathered enough evidence to prove that she had either incited or directly participated in the murder of her ex-husband, Michael. The case was delayed, and it was not until June 2022 that hearings began regarding her involvement in Michael's murder. The prosecutor's office believes that Bianca's main motive was her desire to avoid sharing custody of her child and her fear that the father might take the child away. The police discovered that Bianca had planned to imprison her third husband, Glenn, to remove him from her life, as she found him too old and was bored with him. However, the attack did not go as planned, resulting in the deaths of both Michael and Glenn. The prosecution argued that Bianca had written a text message pretending to be Glenn to create an alibi. They also revealed that the outing with Glenn's mother was part of the plan for the crime. To convince the jury, they thoroughly analyzed all the recordings of conversations and text messages. All available evidence was presented, including a map that Bianca was said to have drawn. Bianca's DNA and fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, which clearly indicated that she had lied. Her attorney claimed that this was only circumstantial evidence. It was believed that Glenn disliked Michael because of his relationship with her son. However, several witnesses testified for the prosecution, claiming that Bianca had long wanted to get rid of Michael, her ex-husband, due to a custody dispute. Even Bianca's mother testified in court that the day after the murder, her daughter called to confess that Glenn should not have died and that it was her fault. Bianca claimed that the fingerprints found on the murder weapon were the result of an intimate encounter between her and Glenn. She stated that he was aroused when she pointed the gun at him, but this explanation seemed implausible and did not account for her dishonesty during the interrogations. A few weeks after she began contacting her new boyfriend, Bianca discovered that she was pregnant again. He offered to recant his statement to the police if she forgave him and returned to him, but Bianca believed that the real father of the child was someone else. The jury deliberated on the complicated case but could not reach a unanimous verdict, leading to the cancellation of the original hearings. A retrial began in August, but it was also found to be flawed due to arguments that violated court rules. In December 2022, the case returned to court, this time with all the evidence gathered during the investigation presented. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including text messages exchanged between Bianca and Glenn. In these messages, Bianca mentioned celebrating a special day, although she had no legitimate reason for the occasion. This implied a connection to the murder. Ultimately, the jury concluded that Bianca was the cunning mastermind behind this terrible crime. 2 lives were lost, one of which was cruelly deceived. People were horrified by the level of manipulation Glenn faced before his death. Bianca recognized his weakness and exploited it to her own advantage, trying to achieve multiple goals at once. However, Glenn's death was not part of her plan. She mistakenly believed she could convince her husband to admit his guilt and escape the consequences. Bianca Edmonds was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Her children were placed in foster care with relatives, leaving them without parental care. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Maribel Ramos. California is one of the most prominent states in the United States, known for its warm climate, beautiful beaches, and world-class entertainment industry. Many come to California with hopes of building a better life. However, not everyone achieves their dreams. For some, California can be a land of promise, but for others, it presents harsh challenges. Maribel Ramos had a long-term goal of entering law enforcement. However, she needed to obtain a higher education, and to afford that, she joined the military. Maribel served 2 combat tours in Iraq and planned to graduate from California State University, Fullerton, with a degree in criminal justice. A veteran of the U.S. Army, she had served for 8 years and was looking forward to returning to civilian life. Maribel knew her goals and was determined to achieve them. After her military service, she shifted her focus to new opportunities, including her desire to enroll at a university in California. Orange, California, where she lived until her mother's passing in 2009. Then, Maribel reached out to her sister, Lucy, asking if she could move in with her. Lucy declined, explaining that she and her daughter were settled in a different location, but she would consider moving in with Maribel if she was unable to find a roommate. To find a roommate, Maribel placed an advertisement and soon received several responses. One inquiry stood out, a man named Kwang Choi Joy, who described himself as seeking a place to stay while job hunting. After meeting Kwang, both Maribel and Lucy found him to be calm and educated. He mentioned to the sisters that he had never been married and had no children. After Kwang moved in with Maribel, it quickly became evident that he was quite isolated. He spent a lot of time alone at home and rarely ventured outside. To help him connect, Maribel started inviting Kwang to family gatherings, dinners, games, and parties, where he met many of her relatives. Over time, Maribel began to change her routine and started participating in a weekly softball game, which was unusual for her. On May 2013, she disappeared when she failed to show up for a scheduled event. Maribel's family and friends made several attempts to reach her, but none were successful. They checked her apartment but found no sign of her. Concerned, they reported her missing, prompting the authorities to launch an investigation. Police officers visited Maribel's apartment but received no response after knocking on the door. Everything outside seemed normal, with no signs of trouble. There were no broken windows or indications of a break-in. As a result, the officers decided to enter the apartment to search for Maribel. There were no indications of a crime at Maribel's home. A search revealed that she was not packing for a trip. All her clothes were neatly in place, except for her mobile phone, wallet, and identification. Since Maribel's car was parked outside, investigators had their suspicions. Maribel was not the kind of person to vanish without a trace, which raised concerns that she might be in danger. When investigators arrived, Kwang Choi Joy unexpectedly approached them. He mentioned that he had last seen Maribel the previous night around 10 p.m. when he returned from a walk. In the video from the surveillance camera that evening at 8:15 p.m., Maribel had received a check for her apartment, which was the last time she was seen in public. She calmly accepted the envelope and left, showing no signs of fear or urgency. At that time, Maribel's family turned to social media for assistance. They shared a photo of Maribel online, asking anyone with information about her to reach out. They aimed to engage as many people as possible in the search. Meanwhile, investigators attempted to track Maribel's mobile phone, but it had been turned off. During their investigation, the police learned that Maribel had recently started dating a man named Paul Lopez. He was the last person to speak with her on the phone the day before she went missing. As a result, the police asked Paul to come to the station for questioning. Paul appeared confident and explained that he and Maribel were still in the early stages of their relationship. He also mentioned that he was dating other women. When asked if Maribel was seeing anyone else, Paul said he had not inquired about that. He confirmed that he spoke with Maribel on Thursday evening and noted that he was working a shift from 4 p.m. until midnight that day, so they did not meet in person. Investigators observed that while he was cooperative, there was no assurance that he was being truthful. However, Paul's truck had a GPS tracker, allowing officers to monitor his movements that night. The data revealed that Paul was not near Maribel's home. Paul mentioned Maribel's roommate Kwang, noting that their relationship had recently deteriorated. He recounted that Maribel often complained about Kwang's inability to pay rent on time. During a conversation, Paul overheard Maribel tell Kwang that she wanted him to move out the next day. In a speakerphone call, Paul warned Kwang that he would be kicked out if he didn't leave as instructed. Paul offered to help Maribel and said he would come over if she needed assistance, but she declined, stating it wasn't necessary. This was their final conversation. After the conflict between Maribel and Kwang became known, investigators learned that Kwang, who was 54 years old, had moved to the United States from South Korea as a teenager. He had no significant criminal record, and there was nothing indicating any illegal activities in his past. However, further investigation uncovered a history of anger issues. Kwang's sister had once filed a complaint against him due to his volatile temper. While examining his social media, investigators noted that Kwang and Maribel Ramos appeared to share a close bond. Nevertheless, when they spoke with Maribel's family, they learned that her relationship with Kwang was not as ideal as it seemed in their social media photos. It appeared that although they shared a friendly relationship, Kwang desired something deeper. In the summer of 2012, Lucy received a call from Kwang, who admitted that he was in love with Maribel and was trying to find her because of this. Lucy later informed Maribel about the conversation and urged her to promptly reject Kwang's feelings before things escalated. Maribel then spoke with Kwang, making it clear that she did not have romantic feelings for him. At first, Kwang seemed to handle the rejection well. However, as time passed, he began taking extreme actions to win Maribel over. He changed his wardrobe, got a tattoo, and spent over $10,000 on plastic surgery to appear younger. Police discovered alarming evidence, a frantic phone call from Maribel to them just 12 days before she went missing. In the call, Maribel expressed that she felt unsafe around her roommate. To understand the relationship between Maribel and Kwang, investigators brought him in for questioning. He appeared calm and friendly, expressing concern over her disappearance. Kwang claimed they had been roommates for about a year and a half, sharing enjoyable experiences like cruises, dancing, and parties. However, investigators suspected that the reality was not as ideal as Kwang portrayed it, and pressed him to explain Maribel's 911 call. Kwang mentioned that he and Maribel went to karaoke that night and ended up arguing. He noted that Maribel's behavior when drinking alcohol could be either very friendly or aggressive. When detectives asked about the argument, Kwang mentioned that it occurred on Thursday evening and was about the rent. He believed the detectives should investigate further, since he last saw Maribel at 9 p.m. when he took a drive to cool off after their disagreement. When he returned, she was missing, and he thought someone might have taken her away, because her car was still in its place. Although Kwang's account seemed believable, some aspects of his appearance raised suspicions. He claimed he had scratched himself on bushes while walking in the park, which seemed odd. At this stage of the investigation, there was no evidence that Kwang was involved in Maribel's disappearance. As days passed, the search for Maribel became increasingly difficult, and the likelihood of finding her alive decreased. To uncover new evidence, detectives decided to involve forensic experts to thoroughly examine Maribel's home, hoping they would find clues that were previously overlooked. During this time, Kwang cooperated with the police, allowing them to search his rented car without a warrant, including a detailed inspection by a police dog trained to detect human remains. However, the dog did not find any traces in the house or the vehicles. Meanwhile, a few days after Maribel's disappearance, Kwang expressed his feelings of missing his friend on forums dedicated to the case. Despite his attempts to portray himself as a grieving roommate, Kwang began to distance himself from Maribel's family, whom he had previously considered friends. He also declined to participate in most vigils and searches for her. This behavior raised red flags for investigators, who hoped he would slip up and reveal information about Maribel. Kwong visited a public library to use the internet since he had given his phone and laptop to the police. Detectives requested surveillance footage, which showed nothing unusual. He used the laptop for about 2 hours before returning it. They were eager to check the browser history on the laptop, but it had been cleared to protect users' privacy after it was returned, adding to the police's frustrations as they continued their efforts to find Maribel. Maribel's family were devastated when Maribel went missing, and no one knew where she had gone or what had happened to her. In their desperation, her family put up flyers throughout the city, hoping someone might have seen her or have information about her whereabouts. However, this effort was not enough. Realizing they needed to reach a wider audience, they created a social media account to share Maribel's situation and ask for help from anyone who might know something about Maribel. For 2 weeks, the police had no leads on her disappearance. Then, an unexpected development occurred. Maribel's family announced on social media that they would organize a walk and search for her in Modjeska Canyon. At that time, detectives discovered that Kwong had returned the rented car, which raised their suspicions. They decided to search the car again. During the first search, the police dog did not detect any scent, but this time it quickly reacted to a smell coming from the trunk. While this evidence was not enough to make an arrest, it indicated to the detectives that they were on the right track. When Kwong went to the library to use the laptop again, he saw on Facebook that Maribel's family was organizing a walk-and-search event in Modjeska Canyon. Unbeknownst to him, the police had obtained a warrant that allowed them to remotely access the laptop he was using. Detectives were able to see his search history, which included queries about how long it takes for a human body to decompose. He also looked up the location in the canyon where Maribel's family planned to gather for the search. After searching on Google Maps, he zoomed in and out of the area, which was 10 miles away from Modjeska Canyon. The officers following his actions were shocked. It became clear that Kwong had inadvertently revealed to them the location where he had hidden Maribel's body. Investigators quickly arrived at a remote area with no nearby houses. After searching for 30 minutes, they discovered a shallow grave. While they suspected the remains belonged to Maribel, they needed forensic confirmation before arresting Kwong. Forensic experts confirmed the victim's identity using dental records. The remains were indeed those of Maribel Ramos. Due to various animals in the environment, determining the exact cause of death was not possible. When Kwong noticed the approaching officers, he attempted to escape by jumping out of a window, but was apprehended and taken to the police station. He continued to deny any involvement in Maribel's disappearance, unaware that the police had already identified her remains. Kwong was charged with multiple offenses. Maribel's family continued to cherish her memory, yet it became clear that the circumstances surrounding her death were too uncertain to reach a conclusion. Authorities could only speculate on how she might have died at Kwong's hands. Prosecutors claimed that Kwong was in love with Maribel, while she did not reciprocate his feelings. Given Maribel's combat training, which could have allowed her to easily overpower Kwong in a fair fight, it was assumed he must have set up an attack. Investigators believed he entered her room during the night and suffocated her while she slept. He then reportedly placed her body in the trunk of his rented car and drove to a secluded spot where he had to crawl under a taut wire. Although there was a possibility that he moved Maribel's body multiple times, there was no evidence to support that theory. Additionally, very little forensic evidence connected Kwong to the crime. In court, Kwong did not plead guilty. He expressed that he would not apologize for something he insisted he did not do. He stated that he had never searched for the grave's location in the canyon and suggested that someone was framing him. He claimed he had nothing to contribute and maintained that he was not involved in Maribel's death. Kwong proposed that Maribel might have died from an illness after years of struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and feelings of paranoia, the prosecutors acknowledged that the case was largely circumstantial, highlighting that key evidence included a library search that focused on the specific area where Maribel's body was discovered. He was held in the Orange County Jail on a $1 million bail. In July 2014, the court found Kwang Choi Joy guilty of murdering Maribel Ramos. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Daniele De Santis and Eleonora Manta. In 2020, Daniele De Santis turned 33 years old. He was born in Lecce, Italy, and lived in a nice apartment in an affluent part of the city. Throughout his career in sports, he became a well-known referee for football matches. By 2019, Daniele had officiated over 130 matches during the spring season, demonstrating his success in the profession. Daniele was getting ready to officiate during the 2020-2021 season, but unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. At this time, his girlfriend, Eleonora Manta, was pursuing her own dream of higher education in law. Recently, she had won a competition that allowed her to enroll in the law faculty at the university, marking a significant milestone in her life. With this dream starting to come true, she decided to focus on her desire to start a family as well. Fortunately, everything was going well, as she and Daniele had been in a relationship for several years and were preparing to get married. They had much in common, sharing hobbies and reflecting each other's personalities. According to their family and friends, they rarely argued, were often seen as a joyful, energetic pair. It seemed that a bright future awaited this lovely couple. Daniele grew up in a loving family with both parents and two sisters. In contrast, Eleonora was raised by her mother, who had to care for her children alone after separating from an abusive husband who struggled with alcoholism. Eleonora's mother had a daughter and two sons from that difficult relationship. Eleonora lived with her family until early 2020 and was preparing to move out to live with Daniele. There was one complication: Daniele had previously rented out a room in his apartment to students from the local university. He needed to evict the tenant before Eleonora could move in. She initially planned to move in during the summer of 2020, but various organizational challenges arose. As a result, they set the official start date for their cohabitation as September. The evening of this incident would turn into a horrifying chapter for Daniele and Eleonora. It all started on September 21, 2020. Neighbors heard distressing screams from a woman. At 8:54 p.m., a local boy walking his dog noticed a strange man running out of an apartment on Via Montello. The boy caught sight of the man's cold, emotionless eyes and froze in fear during his brief gaze. The man fled the scene, and the boy hurried home to report the incident to the police. When officers arrived, they found anxious neighbors who reported seeing a hooded man escaping from a nearby apartment. In the stairwell, they discovered Daniele lying on his back in a pool of blood. He had died from multiple stab wounds. The door to his apartment was wide open, and inside, Eleonora lay injured in the hallway. She had also succumbed to her wounds, having suffered numerous stab wounds. Initially, the police considered that the attacker might have targeted them for robbery, as Daniele was well known and wealthy, making him a tempting target. However, as investigations progressed, this theory began to lose credibility. Several important pieces of evidence were collected at the crime scene, including cable ties, 2 bottles of bleach, a black surgical mask, and women's flesh-colored tights. That tight had a drawn sad face on them, were stained with blood. A handprint found on the tights likely belonged to the attacker during the struggle. It was challenging to identify the assailant who attacked Daniele and Eleonora, but it was clear from the start that the attack was particularly brutal. The evidence suggested that it was not a robbery but a planned act. Detectives used witness accounts to create a sketch of the attacker. Thanks to a torn mask, several people saw him, allowing them to provide a detailed description of the knife-wielding criminal. Some residents glimpsed him through their peepholes. One woman saw him brandishing a knife while partially opening her door. Additionally, the boy walking his dog remembered the attacker well. He described him as a young man of average height wearing a hoodie and carrying a dark blue backpack. This boy also noted the direction in which the attacker fled, helping investigators begin their pursuit of the assailant. The killer hurriedly wanted to escape before the authorities arrived. Likely, this allowed the boy to survive the encounter. The victims' bodies were quickly taken for autopsy and forensic examinations. At this time, their families decided on burying them in separate locations. Daniele was honored in a farewell service at the Lecce Cathedral early on the morning of September 26, while Eleonora was laid to rest in her hometown, just a few kilometers from where the tragic events occurred. Eleonora's mother chose to dress her daughter in a wedding gown that she had intended to give her when Eleonora moved in with her boyfriend, as they planned to marry once she settled into her new home. Meanwhile, investigators worked diligently on the evidence and searched for the attacker, using the findings from the forensic examination. It was revealed that Daniele had suffered 38 stab wounds, while Eleonora had 37. This level of violence was clearly excessive for a robbery gone wrong, as robbers typically use 1 or 2 shots and do not spend time inflicting multiple stab wounds. The nature of the attack indicated that the perpetrator had specifically targeted his victims, suggesting it was an act of revenge or a crime driven by passion. The investigation into the murder focuses on Daniele and Eleonora's acquaintances, as there are suspicions of a love triangle involving them. However, it is difficult to believe that either Daniele or Eleonora had extramarital affairs. They were considered the perfect couple, deeply in love and planning to marry soon, making any theories of infidelity unlikely. Their upcoming move together was intended to lay the groundwork for starting a family, which contradicts the notion of a love triangle. Witnesses reported hearing Eleonora's anguished cries, during which she mentioned the name Andrea or something similar. This led investigators to search for men with that name, prioritizing those closest to Daniele and Eleonora. The next suspect was the deceased's best friend. When investigators checked Danielle's mobile phone records, they found that he had contacted his friend at 7:30 p.m. However, this friend had a solid alibi that was easily verified, so he was removed from suspicion. While looking into, the police identified a 37-year-old acquaintance of the couple, who quickly became the main suspect. He also had a strong alibi supported by multiple witnesses and video footage proving he was not at the crime scene during the attack. He also removed from suspicion. The police examined the entire list of names, but none of the men named Andrea appeared to be connected to the crime. The investigation reached a standstill, but this did not last long. The verification process took considerable time, but it was eventually revealed that the confusion arose from a mistake. The name was actually different. By this point, several days had passed since the murders. The Carabinieri were unsure who had attacked Daniele and Eleonora or why. They faced mounting pressure from the worried public. The precinct was inundated with calls demanding the capture of the criminal and the streets made safe. This panic led to numerous false reports about potential suspects that needed to be investigated. The investigation faced delays due to new information. The police discovered a student who had previously rented a room from Daniele before Eleonora moved in. This student was named Antonio DeMarco, not Andrea. The investigators decided to look into Antonio anyway. There was limited information available about him, but what they found was concerning. A witness at the police station, who knew Antonio personally, recognized him from a composite sketch shown on television. The man became another important witness and revealed that Antonio was studying nursing at the university. Unfortunately, at that time, Antonio was not living on campus, and the investigators could not reach him since no one knew his whereabouts. A significant breakthrough occurred during a second examination of the crime scene. Forensic experts found a handwritten note that had been overlooked during the initial visit to Daniele and Eleonora's apartment. This note, along with masks, bleach, and ties, outlined the steps the attacker planned to take against victims. The first step involved returning home, where a change of clothes had been prepared, along with the ties meant to restrain the victims. The note detailed plans to destroy evidence, included an alibi claiming the attacker would be at home during the incident. In reality, the attacker intended to go to the victim's house, having mapped out several routes to avoid surveillance cameras during the short time needed to reach them. The criminal had a mask and a balaclava made from tights to hide his identity. While he planned to attack Daniele and Eleonora, he did not specify his motive. After the attack, he intended to return home quickly to dispose of the bloody clothes, use bleach, and meticulously eliminate any evidence of the crime. The most comprehensive part of the note focused on avoiding police detection and leaving no trace. It included instructions for covering his fingerprints. He planned to handle other items only after ensuring he would not leave any evidence on them. The attacker allocated around 15 minutes to this cleanup process and set aside half an hour to completely erase any traces of the crime. The police discovered a list that helped them connect the last suspect to the double murder. Their next step was to locate Antonio and collect his materials for comparison. However, his whereabouts were still unknown. Detectives started to track the killer's movements after the crime by analyzing surveillance footage and gathering witness statements to reconstruct his route. Nonetheless, he was able to traverse part of his route without being seen. Detectives tracked down the murderer to a street just a few blocks from Danielle's home, where they discovered that Antonio DeMarco was living with several other students. The police located Antonio. They began monitoring him to collect his DNA, fingerprints, and ideally, handwriting samples for comparison with the note and evidence from the crime scene. He led a seemingly normal life, appearing unaffected by the incident, and mostly spent his time alone. He often visited various shops around the city, including a comic book store near his apartment. At the comic book store, Antonio paid in cash, which could have left his fingerprints. The money was confiscated and sent for analysis. Additionally, investigators obtained handwriting samples from Antonio by examining his university assignments. The analysis revealed that his handwriting matched the note found at the crime scene. With this evidence, the case against him strengthened, indicating his involvement in the double murder. At 21:40 on September 28, 2020, Antonio DeMarco was arrested. In the parking lot, he encountered two carabinieri approached him, prepared to draw their weapons. Instead of resisting, Antonio smirked at one of the officers and asked how long they had been following him, feeling a sense of relief at being caught. By this point, detectives were certain that Antonio was the murderer. They had no doubts about his guilt, but the motive for the crime remained unclear. At just 21 years old, Antonio was an outstanding student who had always presented himself well during his internship at the medical center. His classmates and colleagues would never have guessed he was capable of committing a double murder. The police were astonished to discover how effectively he had concealed his true nature. Antonio's mother was the first to discuss her son's issues. She explained that he had spent countless hours drawing since early childhood, often creating unsettling images. He was easily distracted from this activity and could sometimes panic if interrupted. His psychiatrist confirmed that he exhibited other troubling behaviors. As Antonio grew older, he changed his social circle. While studying, he chose to live with Daniele, who offered him a room at a good price. It was conveniently located near the university and close to the hospital where Antonio was interning. To Daniele, Antonio seemed like a respectful young man, and there were no red flags. For several months, their arrangement worked well. Antonio consistently paid his rent and was no trouble at all. When Daniele informed Antonio that he would need to move out to make room for Eleonora, Antonio handled it calmly. He mentioned that he planned to find an apartment closer to the hospital. Although he did not show any outward signs of distress, the news was a difficult surprise for him. He agreed to move out and returned the apartment key to Daniele on the agreed date. What Daniele was unaware of was that Antonio had made several copies of the key and held a deep resentment towards him. After his arrest, Antonio DeMarco quickly admitted to his crime. He revealed that he had intended to murder Daniele from the moment he moved in with Daniele. However, Eleonora's unexpected arrival disrupted his plans, forcing him to abandon his original idea of carrying out the attack. He had initially intended to strike while Daniele was asleep. Antonio stated that Daniele had never mistreated him, but he felt a growing dissatisfaction during his time in Daniele's apartment. He believed he harbored a lot of anger towards Daniele, which eventually led to an explosive outburst. This anger may have been intensified by jealousy over the couple's relationship. Throughout conversations with detectives, they observed that Antonio showed no remorse. He described the brutal double murder as if it were a normal, obvious act. Antonio claimed he arrived at Daniele's apartment that evening at 8:43 p.m. He first walked by the windows to listen and check if there were more than 2 people inside. If there were, he would have left, as he felt unprepared to confront a larger group. After confirming it was manageable, he used his key to enter through the bathroom while Daniele and Eleonora was having dinner in the kitchen. As soon as he entered, Daniele stood up to confront him. Antonio was wearing a mask made from women's pantyhose with a sad smiley face drawn on it. Antonio later admitted he planned to use this disguise for future crimes. Despite having a punctured lung, Daniele fought back fiercely. During the struggle, Daniele managed to tear off the mask, make Antonio fled without it, so witnesses were later able to identify him. Eleonora screamed and attempted to assist Daniele by trying to push Antonio away from him. In the process, she sustained serious injuries. Once Daniele was dealt with, Antonio turned his aggression toward her in the hallway, delivering multiple stabs. Antonio intended to leave a chilling message on the wall using red paint, representing the victim's blood, but chose not to do so. After committing the crime, he rushed into the street and accidentally bumped into a boy walking his dog before running home. Before entering the apartment he shared with other students, Antonio disposed of his bloody clothes and changed into a pre-prepared outfit from his backpack. In the weeks that followed, despite seeming calm, Antonio struggled with guilt and attempted to confess before being caught. One night, he wrote an email to his mother confessing to the double murder but ultimately decided not to send it. The police later discovered this unsent email on his laptop, but it held little significance as it wasn't seen as a formal admission of guilt. Interestingly, the email had 2 potential recipients, his mother and a doctor at a psychiatric hospital where he had been evaluated. Known for his mental instability and aggressive tendencies, but no one could have imagined the extent of his crimes. A notebook was found where he regularly documented his discontent with the world. He had very few friends and struggled to fit into society, leading him to seek the company of escort service in an attempt to escape his pain, but it proved ineffective. He longed to meet a normal girl and establish a relationship, but this desire turned into an obsession filled with disappointment. During his periods of distress, he became acutely aware of the relationships that others, including acquaintances and strangers, had. When he discovered that Daniele was in a relationship, Antonio experienced another emotional crisis and decided to channel his anguish into violence. In his diary, Antonio began crafting a gruesome script for an attack, complete with detailed accounts of torture and suffering. He portraying himself as a serial killer who inflicted pain on random people purely out of desire. Antonio explained that he started writing to express his suffering on paper instead of letting it affect his real life. On February 17, 2021, a request was made for a psychiatric evaluation. Antonio DeMarco underwent several assessments, and doctors concluded that he was sane. They diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and other issues, but confirmed that he was fully aware of his actions during the attack. Consequently, Antonio was considered sane and fit to participate in the trial. Despite this, his lawyers continued to argue for his insanity and requested further evaluations, but these requests were denied. The prosecution presented compelling evidence of premeditation and careful planning, including statements made by the defendant himself. The judge even expressed his belief that if Antonio had not been apprehended, he likely would have become a serial killer, bringing violence to the streets. This viewpoint was supported by two psychiatrists who assessed his mental state before the trial. Forensic tests on items found at the crime scene, such as a mask, tights, and a knife, matched the defendant's DNA. Additionally, an investigation of Antonio's computer and phone revealed photographs of Daniele and Eleonora, suggesting that he had been planning the crime well in advance. Before going home, he messaged friends to inform them that they would never see him again, implying he anticipated being caught and imprisoned. On June 7, 2022, Antonio was convicted of double murder and received a life sentence. In November 2022, he received an additional 4-month sentence for possessing explicit photos of children on his computer. His defense team was unhappy with the verdict and pursued an appeal, which was granted on December 2022, resulting in a new trial. The defense argued that Antonio was insane and did not understand his actions during the murders. The prosecution's main goal was to prevent a potential serial killer from being released and to oppose any reduction of the sentence. In the end, the life sentence was reaffirmed. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Maria Alejandra Lafuente Caso. The main character of this story is Maria Alejandra Lafuente Caso, an attractive and athletic Mexican woman. She maintained her fitness and took pride in her appearance. Maria Alejandra spent a lot of time at the gym and enjoyed sunny days at the beach. She preferred a tan, disapproved of light-colored hair. She also had a negative view of deep-set eyes, believing her own looks represented the ideal of beauty. Her father's was a psychologist and a well-known psychiatrist. She greatly admired him, which inspired her interest in the sciences. Maria opened a private psychology practice in Mexico City. Her clients were primarily young people dealing with issues such as depression, anxiety, behavioral problems, and relationship challenges. Maria Alejandra's marriage ended in divorce, and she has 2 children with her ex-husband. Despite this, she focused all her efforts on finding a new love. In 2011, Maria committed a shocking crime against her ex-husband. A source revealed that the man went to visit their children at Maria's house. She welcomed him, suggested they sit in a living room, explaining that their daughter had a surprise for him and would join them shortly. He sat down on a sofa. Maria blindfolded him to prevent him from seeing the surprise before it was revealed. As minutes passed without their daughter appearing, an uneasy silence hung in the air, causing he to sense that something was amiss. At that moment, he was struck hard on the head with a fireplace poker. He removed his blindfold and asked Maria to calm down, but she continued to attack him. He tried to escape, but the door was locked. Once Maria felt she had control over him, she took a knife, stabbed him in the stomach and back. Trapped, he attempted to wrestle the knife away, but she bit his hand. She then tried to inject him with a syringe, but he fought back, managed to break free and escape. Their daughter, who had witnessed her parents' violent quarrels several times before, saw the incident unfold before her eyes. Despite experiencing multiple incidents of violence, they had never reported anything to the authorities before. However, this time, the ex-husband took action, believing that Maria had gone too far, and he reported the incident to the police. Maria was charged with attempted murder and taken to jail, where a judge ordered her detention. Later, the charge was changed to aggravated assault. On June 2012, Maria was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months in prison. Her skilled lawyers worked hard to secure various benefits for her. They successfully replaced her prison sentence with probation and a fine for damages. Maria Alejandra has paid her ex-husband $1,836, but her lawyers are still not satisfied. They argued that she had acted in self-defense since her ex-husband had hit her. An appeal was filed against the verdict, and the judges of the criminal chamber had to review their decision. Ultimately, they cleared Maria Alejandra of any criminal responsibility. After her release, she continued her psychological consultations as if nothing had happened. She crafted an image of a victim of domestic violence who fought back and ultimately prevailed, which made her more appealing to potential clients. Soon, Maria met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a Mexican businessman. Alan, a tall man aged 41. He was the manager in charge of the tile production business. This role provided Alan with a good income and plenty of free time. Alan was married and had a daughter. However, in 2011, their relationship deteriorated, leading to their separation. Alan's daughter struggled with the new life and fell into a deep depression. Maria Alejandra's father, a well-known psychologist, encouraged Alan's daughter to seek therapy. He recommended his daughter, Maria Alejandra, to the girl. After 3 therapy sessions, Maria expressed a desire to meet Alan, claiming that it would enhance the therapy. However, her true intention was to pursue a romantic relationship with him. It didn't take long for her to begin a romantic relationship with Alan. When Alan's daughter learned about the situation, she became upset and stopped attending her therapy sessions. Ultimately, Alan chose to marry Maria, unaware of the real reasons behind her divorce from her previous husband. In April 2014, Alan visited his parents for the weekend, shared the news about his fiancée. He mentioning that their wedding would be happening soon and that Maria might be pregnant. They got married the following Monday, but no members of the Caso family attended the ceremony, as they had not received an invitation and were told that the wedding would be very small. Alan's sister later shared that the bride's family, her father, mother, and siblings, attended the wedding celebration. The new bride appeared to be perfect, but her true nature became evident only after the wedding. The relationship between Alan and Maria began to change significantly. Alan was a reserved person, leaving many details about their family life unknown. Alan's family noticed that Maria grew increasingly anxious and prone to fits of anger, prompting them to keep their distance and limit communication with her. One day, Maria decided to check Alan's phone and found disturbing messages that indicated he had a mistress. According to her arguments, this became the last straw because she was tired of the cruel treatment and had no desire to reconcile with Alan's changes. Believing there was no way to save their failing marriage, she chose not to seek therapy or consider divorce. Instead, she fixated on one solution: eliminating her husband. With a cold and calculated mindset, she carefully planned her next move. Meanwhile, Alan lived a normal life, unaware of the serious family conflict. He stuck to his routine, working and spending time with his loved ones. Even though his family disapproved of Maria Alejandra, they maintained regular contact with him through WhatsApp. They felt his marriage was rushed, but they respected his choice and supported him. Suddenly, their communication ceased. October 31st, 2014, was the last day he sent messages to his family. He stopped going to work, didn't visit his parents, and didn't see his daughter from his first marriage. He also ignored phone calls and stopped leaving voice messages. However, he continued to send text messages, although they were somewhat strange. Maria Alejandra executed her plan thoughtfully and coldly. She waited for her husband to come home from work and then gave him a drink laced with a psychoactive substance often used to treat depression and other conditions. This substance had a sedative effect, if taking it in large quantities could cause numbness and impaired movement, which was exactly what happened. Maria Alejandra ensured her husband felt no pain before she stabbed him in the abdomen and watched him die. Her immediate priority was to dispose of his body quickly. She laid him on the bedroom floor and used an electric saw to cut his large body into manageable pieces, which she placed in plastic garbage bags. She put the torso in one bag and the arms and legs in another, then packed these bags into a red suitcase for easier transport. The more identifiable body parts, like the head, hands, and feet, were placed in a different bag, hidden in the kitchen freezer. By around 12:45 a.m., Maria Alejandra called the staff of their residential complex for help loading items into her van, as noted in their log. Security personnel observed her looking around nervously and appearing distressed. Her behavior raised suspicion, and rumors circulated that she had discarded bags containing body parts in 2 different parts of the city. After the suitcase was loaded, she drove away and did not return until after 4 a.m., not leaving the house again. Upon her return, she changed the locks on the doors and informed the security guard that she was going on a trip with her husband. After that, there were no further updates about her. A few days later, on November 7, 2014, city police found a human torso in a neighborhood at the intersection of 2 streets. In the afternoon, agents from the Federal Ministry of Public Security reported that various human remains had also been found, including arms and legs without hands and feet, all of which were contained in black plastic bags. The locations of the bags were quite far apart. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory, where anthropologists confirmed they belonged to one person, but they lacked the means to identify the individual at that time. To mislead Alan's relatives and prevent them from contacting the police, Maria Alejandra used her husband's phone to respond to incoming messages. This tactic allowed her to temporarily prevent anyone from suspecting Alan's tragic fate. She needed time to come up with a plan to evade responsibility, similar to how she had acted after attacking her first husband. Alan's siblings and daughter received WhatsApp messages that seemed to express his regret about the marriage. He claimed he was struggling with problems but had recently met a wonderful woman and was now dating her. In other messages, which contradicted each other, he mentioned that he enjoyed being alone, while in others, he talked about traveling. At the same time, Maria Alejandra's father began calling Alan's father's home to ask if they knew the whereabouts of his daughter. He had been searching for several days without receiving any news from her. Later, he called Alan's parents again and informed them that Maria Alejandra was supposedly at the National Institute, where she was being treated for depression caused by Alan's alleged infidelity. Maria's father also noted that his daughter was suffering from paranoia, thinking that the police were hunting her, and this became another reason for her hospitalization. The confusion and deception lasted for months until December, a time when families gather and spend time together for the holidays. Therefore, Alan's family and close friends decided to visit him, but once again, Maria Alejandra got ahead of them. She warned that she and her husband would not be home because they had decided to take a spontaneous vacation, which alarmed Alan's relatives, especially since Maria's father had recently reported that his daughter was in a psychiatric clinic. It was then that the relatives contacted the police and filed a report. Authorities needed several days to make the necessary inquiries and analyze the situation. Prosecutors exchanged information with staff from the Missing Persons Assistance Center, and their collaboration helped significantly advance the investigation. Experts compared the characteristics of the human remains found with the descriptions of various missing persons. It became clear that the dismembered body belonged to Alan. Later, he was identified, and the relatives decided to search the couple's home. Upon arrival, officers encountered Maria Alejandra, who was taken to the station where a search warrant was issued. Once all the formalities were settled, the police searched the house for evidence and found Alan's head, hands stored in the freezer, along with an electric saw. During the inspection of the rooms, experts used luminol tests and discovered traces of blood in one of the rooms, in the bathroom. They also noticed that there was a cut-out hole in the surface of the mattress and a piece of carpet was missing. All of this was done to conceal traces of fluids. Later, it was established that parts of Alan's body were found on these items. Initially, Maria Alejandra gave testimony as a witness, but when the contradictions became too obvious, she was reclassified as a suspect. It was revealed that she had sent a message from her husband's mobile phone to make his family believe that he was alive and did not report his disappearance. Maria Alejandra claimed she had not seen him for several days and had not even communicated with him by phone, using her position as a psychologist to try to prove her innocence. She showed a registration card from the psychiatric clinic dated to coincide with the date of Alan's presumed death. Maria Alejandra denied any involvement in the murder, but Alan's body spoke for itself, and forensic experts were able to fully reconstruct the timeline of the events. The analyses and investigations recorded in the autopsy report showed that there was a wound on the body inflicted by a sharp object that penetrated the abdominal cavity, which became fatal. The body was then dismembered with a sharp object with pointed edges. After the relevant study results were obtained, it became known that Alan had died between the last hours of November 5, 2014, and the early morning of the following day. The collected evidence allowed investigators to establish a direct link between Maria and the brutal death of her husband. It was also discovered where she was on that fateful day, aided by a surveillance log of the building, which recorded the specific time she left the house and her return. There was also an incident involving a heavy suitcase that someone helped her put into the car. From statements made by Alan's daughter and his sister, it was revealed that Maria had threatened Alan's daughter, saying that she would took her own life if Alan's daughter opposed Maria's relationship with Alan. Although Maria tried to pretend she was undergoing treatment in a psychiatric clinic to avoid responsibility, the specialists found no evidence of her mental illness. Cornered by irrefutable evidence, Maria Alejandra had no choice but to confess to attacking her husband, but she immediately justified herself by saying she was tired of the violence from his side. On December 2014, the judge issued a detention order on charges of murder with aggravating circumstances. After her arrest, Maria Alejandra was taken to the Women's Social Rehabilitation Center in Mexico City. Later, new information emerged that allegedly indicated Maria Alejandra's involvement in other violent acts resulting in death. Her ex-husband managed to escape from her, and there is also an unidentified victim who may have been killed by her in 2012. These incidents have led to suspicions that her father aided in these crimes, helping to cover them up and divert public attention. In Alan's case, it is believed that Maria's father was not only involved in concealing the acts but also in planning the attack. The motive behind these events is believed to be purely economic. However, justice could not fully substantiate this claim. After 8 years, on September 2022, the Attorney General's Office of the Capital announced the final verdict for involuntary manslaughter. Maria Alejandra Lafuente Caso was sentenced to 46 years and 6 months in prison for the murder of her husband, Alan Carrera Cuellar. Following the verdict, she was not allowed to appeal or receive any alternative or leniency measures. Additionally, she was required to cover damages and funeral costs. She lost her political rights. Maria Alejandra used her father's influence and protection to commit crimes against the men in her life without remorse. After evading punishment for attacking her first husband, she successfully portrayed herself as a victim, showcasing her manipulative skills. Just 3 years later, she killed her second husband with chilling composure. She meticulously planned this crime and even feigned mental illness to avoid accountability again, but this time, her actions caught up with her. The law delivered a fair and severe sentence that she could not escape. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lindley Rennick. Ben Rennick was born on August 4, 1987, in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. He was the second and youngest child in his family. His older brother, Sam, considered Ben a precious gift from the moment he was born. From a young age, Ben developed a fascination with snakes. While attending Montgomery County High School, he immersed himself in learning about them and dreamed of starting a snake breeding business. Although this hobby was uncommon, he found it incredibly interesting. As a child, Ben met Lindley, a girl 4 years his senior. She was beautiful, with long, light hair and delicate features, but Ben was too young to pursue a relationship, so nothing happened between them. After graduating high school, Ben continued to focus on his passion for snakes, expanding his knowledge and gaining respect from other experts in the field. 2 years later, Ben's mother passed away from a serious illness. While this was a painful experience, he decided to move forward, possibly to ease the shock. He focused all his efforts on turning his hobby into a source of income, and eventually, his hard work paid off. By 2010, Ben Rennick had become a successful breeder and established a national business called Rennick Reptiles, which specialized in the selective breeding of designer pythons. The business quickly thrived, and soon, reptiles were being sold to customers worldwide, from the UK to Japan. Although Sam and Ben had separate homes, they continued to live on the family farm with their father, honoring their mother's wish not to abandon it after her passing. The 28-acre property provided ample space, allowing the brothers to maintain a close relationship. They often spent weekends fishing together and enjoyed a strong brotherhood. As the business grew, the facility became home to over 3,000 reptiles, some valued at $1,000 each. Ben enjoyed success and often traveled to conventions across the United States, earning a reputation as a prominent figure in the reptile community, even being referred to as the rock star of snakes. In interviews, he attributed his success to his careful attention to his pets and his commitment to his clients. In 2011, he felt particularly fortunate when he reconnected with Lindley, a girl he had had a crush on during his youth. Before reconnecting with Ben, Lindley had been in several relationships. She was initially involved with a man named Michael Humphrey, who was later imprisoned for banned substance possession. After another unsuccessful relationship, Lindley became a mother to a son. By the time she reached out to Ben again, she was single, and Ben had matured, making their communication smooth and comfortable. Ben confidently pursued Lindley, and their relationship quickly became serious. Ben quickly became overwhelmed by the success he achieved at a young age. He was a respected professional, admired by many. Ben was not only business-minded but also kind and mature for his age, which allowed him to take on a fatherly role for Lindley's son, whom he embraced as his own. Eventually, Lindley, her son, and Ben began living together. Tragedy struck the family in 2012 when Frank, the father of Ben and Sam, was involved in a stock scheme that caused significant financial losses for many people. Then, Ben discovered that his father had taken his own life. This devastating event forced the brothers to inherit the family property and confront their loss once again, now complicated by the shame surrounding the incident. Ben found comfort in his personal professional project and in a long-awaited moment with Lindley. In 2014, she accepted his marriage proposal, and that year, they celebrated a wedding. Soon after, they welcomed a daughter named Emma. In his free time, Ben enjoyed playing the drums and watching horror films, but his main focus was on his family. He valued the time spent with his wife and children. To keep the romance alive, he organized weekly date nights with Lindley, just as they had done when they were engaged. This was also his way of showing appreciation for Lindley's hard work, as she dedicated herself to helping him manage their snakes, which involved cleaning and sorting. In 2016, they launched a second business, this time in the personal hygiene sector. They opened a spa in a shopping center in Columbia, Missouri, something Lindley had always dreamed of, given her background as an experienced massage therapist. She invited her longtime friend, Ashley Shaw, to join the salon. Their success continued into 2017, when Ben made $1 million deal selling some of his pythons and anacondas. The agreement included quarterly payments of $200,000, starting with the first payment in February. However, Lindley's business was facing serious financial problems. In early 2017, she had credit debt, and two companies sued her for over $88,000 in unpaid bills for work done in previous years. Additionally, Lindley was hiding more than just her financial troubles. She created a profile on a dating app and began an affair with a man named Brandon Blackwell, meeting him a few times each month. For reasons that could include her financial struggles, ambition, or feelings of betrayal, Lindley started to contemplate how to rid herself of her husband, Ben, although she never openly expressed this desire. Lindley confided in Ashley, who worked at the spa, claiming that she was a victim of violence and abuse from Ben. Taking advantage of this situation, she persuaded her friend to help her escape. Ashley agreed and provided Lindley with banned substance. On one night in 2017, Lindley secretly drugged Ben by spiking his protein shake with a nearly lethal dose of illegal substances. Miraculously, Ben survived the ordeal, although he became very ill and took a long time to recover. Throughout this process, he never suspected that his wife was involved. The bank that Lindley was in debt to informed Ben of the situation. Aware of the crisis at the spa and his wife's deception, Ben spoke up and shared his feelings with her. This led to a tense atmosphere between them that lasted for several weeks. In mid-May 2017, Lindley decided to contact her ex-boyfriend Michael, who had just been released from prison. She and Ashley visited him at his home. During their conversation, which seemed casual as they reminisced about their past relationship, Lindley claimed to be a victim of an abusive husband. She even confessed to Michael about her failed attempt to use a protein drink to escape her situation. Lindley expressed that she felt trapped and was determined to file for divorce, but she was also afraid of how Ben would react, fearing that his response could threaten her life and the lives of her children. While continuing her affair with Brandon, Lindley made the mistake of sharing every detail of her plans to remove Ben from her life. On June 8, 2017, Lindley and her ex-boyfriend Michael went to the farm, equipped with gloves, a gun, and a plan. Lindley intended to introduce Michael as an old friend interested in Ben's business. However, when Michael saw Ben busy cleaning the breeding facilities, he felt uneasy. He asked Lindley to go back to the car, where he handed her the gun and suggested that she take charge of the plan. Without hesitation or fear, Lindley returned to the scene and, seeing that Ben was focused on his work, she attacked him multiple times. Michael picked up most of the shell casings he found, but he missed a few that were left behind. Afterward, he and Lindley went to the spa, where Lindley removed her clothes. Ashley was there, and Lindley asked her to help wash her body and arms thoroughly. During this time, Lindley explained to Ashley what had happened. Later, Lindley returned to the snake nursery and pretended to be surprised and upset. She called Sam to inform him about Ben's situation. Sam rushed to the scene, upon arrival, thought Ben had been bitten by an anaconda because his skull looked crushed and there were 2 puncture wounds on his arm that resembled bite marks. Sam immediately called emergency services. Montgomery County Coroner Dave Colbert had described the scene as one of the strangest and most dangerous he had encountered in his 20-year career. Investigators searched the nursery, which housed 10-foot pythons and anacondas weighing over 90 kilograms. They were unsure where the anaconda might be hiding. As they carefully examined the area, Colbert made a shocking discovery: Ben's body, lying face down, concealed the actual cause of death. It wasn't an anaconda bite that killed him, he had been attacked with a weapon 8 times at close range. Investigators initially considered the possibility of a botched robbery but dismissed it since none of the snakes were missing. The evidence at the crime scene suggested that Ben was familiar with his killer. The agents decided to closely monitor those who were closest to Ben, ensuring that no potential suspects were overlooked. The day after the murder, detectives questioned Sam and then Lindley. A surprising moment occurred when Lindley tried to blame Sam for the crime, but this theory was never pursued. Sam, who had no gunpowder residue on his hands and fully cooperated with the investigation, was released. While the detectives continued their work, the community of reptile breeders came together to support Ben's wife and children by organizing an online auction for snakes. However, just 11 days after Ben's murder, Lindley, who everyone thought was grieving, made a shocking confession during another interrogation of her. She revealed that at the time of the murder, she had an alibi. She was with Brandon, her affair partner. Detectives investigated the alibis of Lindley and Brandon, confirming they were not involved. Next, they questioned Ashley. At the same time, they examined Lindley and Ben's Facebook accounts, discovered that the spa was facing financial difficulties, which had made Ben very angry. For months after the incident, Lindley returned to the police station and agreed to take a polygraph test. However, the test was unsuccessful when she was asked about her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael and the messages they had exchanged in the hours surrounding Ben's death. Lindley stated that Michael had visited the snake farm as a client. Lindley faced a lot of circumstantial evidence that seemed to implicate her, and investigators made this clear to her. However, her gunshot residue test came back negative. Without any witnesses, a murder weapon, or direct evidence tying her to the crime, the officers had no option but to let her go free from the interrogation room. A few weeks later, claiming financial difficulties, Lindley closed the spa and quickly left town. Before leaving, she put the family property up for sale. In February 2018, she applied for 2 types of property payments from the family allowance, totaling $15,000, along with monthly family benefits. That summer, she sold Ben's property to a married couple for over $740,000, unaware that the police were suspicious of her. Sam remained oblivious to her connection to his brother's murder. Months passed with no arrests made. Snake enthusiasts confused and reached out to each other for any information about the case. Sam and others in Ben's close circle wanted to support Lindley as much as they could. However, as time passed, they noticed something was wrong when she refused to talk to them, wouldn't let Sam see the children, and prevented him from taking Ben's belongings. A year and a half after Ben's murder, Lindley and Brandon had a child together, but Lindley soon claimed that Brandon had become aggressive, leading her to break up with him. She also secured a restraining order against him and accused him of violence. Brandon denied these claims but ended up in jail because of them. Meanwhile, speculation grew about the murder, with many people suspecting that Lindley might have been involved or even orchestrated it through someone else. This question lingered for nearly 3 years without any answers, leaving authorities with little progress in the investigation. In January 2020, the case took an unexpected, welcome turn. Brandon, who was in jail, decided to make a deal. He contacted the police to share what he knew about Ben's unsolved murder case, claiming he was closely involved. This prompted a renewed investigation. On January 16, 2020, the police arrested Lindley and Michael for murder, shocking their close friends. Sam felt relieved to finally learn the truth. However, investigators needed more evidence. They sought a witness who could provide crucial details. The detectives then arrested Ashley and explained her potential legal consequences. She could either align with Lindley and face severe charges as an accomplice or cooperate with the investigation, which could lead to Lindley being charged with first-degree murder. The authorities promised Ashley leniency if she agreed to cooperate. She ultimately revealed everything, from the harmful ingredients in the lethal cocktail to the details of the murder. Nonetheless, the murder weapon was still missing. By the end of 2021, Sam was preparing for the trials against the alleged murderers of his brother. He was mainly focused on staying composed throughout the process. Lindley's defense team was working hard to prevent Brandon's testimony from being included in the trial. The prosecution argued that Lindley had fired the gun and that Michael Humphrey was also part of the plan. The defense countered by claiming that Lindley had tricked Michael into coming to a snake farm by telling him she needed protection for a divorce discussion with Ben. They stated that Michael was caught off guard when Lindley suddenly pulled out a weapon and attacked Ben. Ultimately, the jury did not see Michael as an innocent witness and found him guilty of first-degree murder after several hours of deliberation. Facing a life sentence, Michael changed his account, claiming he had supplied the gun used by Lindley. He agreed to cooperate with the investigation in hopes of being released on parole. He guided the investigators to the murder weapon, which had been hidden in the attic of Lindley's mother's house. With the weapon recovered, the jury now had to address the lingering question: who actually pulled the trigger? The prosecution painted Lindley as a woman as cold-blooded as one of Ben's snakes, portraying her as a killer who attacked Ben and then continued her day as if nothing had happened. As the trial neared its conclusion, the defense made a bold move by allowing Lindley to recount the troubled and violent marriage she claimed she was escaping. However, she had no evidence to support her story, and there were no police reports documenting any physical abuse. Nearly 5 years had passed since Ben's murder, and a weary Sam awaited the jury's decision regarding Lindley. After 12 hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict: Lindley Rennick was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Sam's disappointment with the sentence seemed to resonate with the judge, but Missouri state laws prevented any increase in the sentence. Lindley would become eligible for parole in 2035, and the charges against Brandon were dismissed. Ben's close friends still remember him as if he were alive. A new species of snake, called the Rennick ghost, was named in his honor. This snake is distinct for having fewer black spots, which gives it a ghostly appearance, a strong symbol of how much he meant to the community. They continue to miss him deeply, and at every event his friends attend, there is always an empty spot that can never be filled. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Griffiths. In 2009, Mary Griffiths was a 38-year-old woman and the mother of 3 daughters, aged 9, 10, and 13. All 3 children were born during her marriage. However, her relationship with her husband did not last long. By 2007, they had divorced, but they remained on good terms. Mary was granted primary custody of the children while her ex-husband took them on weekends. There were no disputes regarding this arrangement. Mary focused on moving forward and providing for her daughters. She worked hard to ensure they had everything they needed. To save time on commuting and spend more time with her children, she found a job as a fitness instructor at a gym near her rented home. Over time, Mary was able to purchase a house in the small town of Berry Street, Edmonds, UK. Her life seemed to be improving more and more. Mary decided to try building a relationship again. With her good looks, attractiveness, and great physical shape, she felt confident that finding a partner wouldn't be a problem. Thanks to her outgoing personality and striking appearance, she quickly caught the attention of John McFarlane. They met during a time when both were searching for new jobs. As they got to know each other, they discovered a shared passion for martial arts, sports, and similar perspectives on life. Over time, Mary and John began taking the same fitness classes. They both became instructors at the same fitness center. Despite some clear differences between them, they connected easily. They began spending more time together, commuting to work, having lunch, and hanging out after their shifts. John even covered for Mary at work when she couldn't make it. However, for Mary, the relationship was just a friendship. Mary is outgoing, so she easily connects with people, including John. She considers him a friend and firmly believes their relationship is purely platonic. When speaking with her family and friends, she often emphasizes that there is absolutely no possibility of a romantic relationship between her and John, partly because he is married. Unfortunately, John saw things differently. He interpreted Mary's friendliness and conversations with him as a sign that they could become a couple. Deeply infatuated with her, he began to romanticize their interactions. Mary's behavior only reinforced his feelings. For years after they became friends, Mary helped organize John's 40th birthday party. John misinterpreted this gesture as something deeply personal, an indication that she had romantic feelings for him, which only reinforced his certainty about his feelings for her. John was naturally introverted and had little experience with women who offered him the kind of warmth and care that Mary did. His marriage had grown cold over time, so Mary's attitude felt especially significant to him. After the birthday party, he started dreaming of a life with her by his side. These fantasies quickly turned into an obsession, despite him still being married. He began discussing with his friends the possibility of divorcing his wife to pursue Mary. Mary, however, was unaware of his feelings. A few months later, she started dating someone else, which shocked and disappointed him. Mary was happy in her new relationship and openly shared details with him, not realizing the emotional pain it caused. For him, the situation became deeply traumatic. Resentment and anger built up over time, eventually becoming impossible for him to contain. Mary shared a post about her boyfriend on social media, and that was when the problem started. John responded to the post by leaving angry messages. He insulted Mary and made baseless accusations, including infidelity and a reckless lifestyle, none of which were true. John's behavior grew increasingly obsessive, and he started attempting to intimidate Mary through frequent and unsettling phone calls. Mary started to notice that John would appear at places she visited, even though he had no reason to know her whereabouts. Their interactions dwindled, and the distance between them grew, but John was clearly unhappy about this. The tension escalated further as he bombarded her with daily phone calls. His erratic behavior began to strain her relationship with her new boyfriend. Mary's friends and family observed that John acted as though they had been in a romantic relationship and believed she had betrayed him. He seemed consumed by these imagined scenarios, leading to ongoing dissatisfaction and aggression. Although John's actions were not illegal, Mary had made it clear on multiple occasions that she only considered him a friend and never intended for their relationship to be more than platonic. Unfortunately, John's perception of the situation did not align with reality. Mary grew increasingly anxious due to John's troubling behavior. Fearing his aggression, she avoided public places in the city, worried she might encounter him. Her fears escalated when an intruder entered her home late at night and slashed all 4 tires on her car. She suspected that John was responsible. She was convinced he wanted to sabotage her relationship with her new boyfriend, leaving her isolated. His interference was successful when he spread false information about her, ultimately causing her and her boyfriend to break up. Mary was devastated by the breakup, while John felt triumphant. Misinterpreting her distress, he believed she was now available and ready to be with him. He saw her resistance as playful teasing, deluding himself with fantasies about their connection. Feeling haunted, John took a drastic step. After learning that Mary had broken up with her boyfriend, he immediately went to court to file for divorce from his wife. Although they had been married for over 20 years, John was determined to leave and start a new life with another woman. This became particularly troubling when Mary found out. She couldn't understand where he was getting his ideas or what was influencing his decisions. The entire situation deeply unsettled her. Seeking advice, she often spoke with her relatives, who encouraged her to contact the police. Mary had enough evidence to take action against him, but her doing so only escalated the situation. John began bombarding Mary with calls and messages. In each message, he expressed his intense emotions, insisting they could be incredibly happy together if she agreed. He claimed Mary had feelings for him that she was suppressing, urging her to be honest and embrace them so they could pursue a life together. However, Mary had no such intentions. In one conversation, she firmly stated that they were just friends and that she had no plans to take their relationship beyond that. This upset John, as his perspective on friendship was different from Mary's. Yet, he couldn't resist trying to become more involved in her life. Although she rejected all his romantic advances, she still maintained their friendship. It seemed she pitied him, and perhaps even feared that ending their connection would lead to serious problems. Mary hoped to continue the relationship peacefully. He, however, took every opportunity to be near her, visiting her home frequently, and she always let him in. During these visits, he repeatedly made advances, such as attempting to kiss her when they sat together on the couch. Mary consistently rejected him, but he persisted. Mary considered ending the meetings, but John then used his cleverness to get closer to her daughters. He bonded with them, spending quality time together, and they began asking when he would visit again. After John's divorce, he spent almost all his free time with Mary and her children, as though he were waiting for them to invite him to live with them. Meanwhile, Mary's relationship with her ex-boyfriend remained unresolved. Both she and her ex had doubts and considered rekindling their relationship. However, those doubts were primarily rooted in John's behavior, making them uncertain about the possibility of being together again. Whenever John sees Mary and her ex-boyfriend together, he gets angry and often has aggressive outbursts. On one occasion, he lost control entirely. Still, she tried to remain patient, while John blamed her for the breakup of his relationship. Eventually, she asked her ex-boyfriend to visit her home more frequently to help her and her children feel safer during those moments. When John found out, he reacted badly. He began posting misleading content on social media, claiming he was in a relationship with Mary. Tired of the situation, she decided to put an end to it. She left a comment under the post, clearly stating that there was no relationship between them. In this situation, the most reasonable thing for John to do is leave Mary alone and focus on his life, allowing her to mend her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. However, John went to Mary's house again instead. By exploiting her sympathy, he convinced her to let him in. Mary, having a kind heart and considering him a friend, allowed him to stay the night, offering him the couch. It was a stormy evening, and she didn't have it in her to leave him out in the bad weather. He appealed to her compassion, reminding her of his struggles after being kicked out by his wife. The arrangement was that he would sleep on the couch, and the next morning, after the children left for school, they would discuss and clarify the situation. For John, it was all just a game. That same night, he attempted to seduce Mary. Mary, however, believed that he stood in her doorway at night, watching her as she slept. At the time, she was in bed with her youngest daughter, who was afraid to sleep alone in her room. She woke up feeling unnerved by his unsettling gaze. She began yelling at him to go away, which woke the children. The incident led to another heated outburst, during which John accused his friend of giving false hope only to crush it for his own amusement. Afterwards, John left, but things took an even darker turn. He started posting alarming content on his social media accounts, talking about death and hinting at ending his life. He also shared these thoughts with many of his friends. At one point, he even shared a disturbing photo of himself standing next to a noose in a barn, as if he were preparing to follow through on his threats. His actions escalated further when he attempted to swallow sleeping pills on 2 separate occasions in a short time span, both of which required medical intervention. On May 3, 2009, John's behavior had become so troubling that Mary insisted he see a psychiatrist. His friends, including his ex-wife, agreed with her. However, the psychiatrist could not diagnose John with any mental disorders and concluded that he was not a danger to himself or others. This misjudgment would prove to be the first in a series of tragic mistakes with devastating consequences. It seemed that John was aware of the issues he was facing and became distressed when the doctors decided not to treat him or admit him to a psychiatric clinic. This news deeply frightened Mary. She felt threatened, worried for the girls around her, and helpless in the face of this danger. On May 5, 2009, Mary's worst fears began to come true. That day, she called emergency services at 999. She told the operator that her friend, John, was acting erratically and appeared to have gone crazy. His alarming behavior left her anxious and unsure of how to handle the situation. Mary explained his history of stalking, his inappropriate actions, and his references to ending his life. Despite these concerns, the operator assessed the situation as non-urgent, indicating a response time of 1 to 4 hours, as all officers were occupied. Mary was informed that a police officer would only be able to visit her the following morning. The operator advised her to call again if the situation escalated, promising a faster response in that case. However, Mary had valid reasons for her initial call. On that day, John attacked her for the first time, exploiting his knowledge of her vulnerabilities. Injured in the attack, she sought treatment for her leg at the hospital. But upon returning home, she found John waiting for her. He was relentless, always lingering near her, pretending to support her, and trying to convince her that she could not live without him. The situation became so dire that when Mary was putting her daughters to bed, the girls were deeply afraid that John might return and harm their mother, possibly taking her away forever. John, finally driven away, was furious. He sent Mary a threatening message, feeling rejected and vowing revenge. Those who knew him were deeply concerned about his behavior and even alerted the police. For instance, Mary's friend called emergency services at around 6:30 p.m. that same day, expressing worry about John's mental state due to his volatile actions. Despite clear evidence of John's dangerous behavior, the authorities failed to take Mary's friend's warning seriously or consider the urgency of her earlier call. Much later, close to midnight, John himself made another call to the police to report a robbery. This ensured that the officers would respond to his call, giving him the opportunity to go to Mary's house. Before leaving, he sent a message to his wife, expressing that he still loved her but blaming her for their problems and the breakup with Mary. He ended the message with an ominous and ambiguous note, suggesting he planned to resolve matters once and for all. John armed himself with an axe and a specialized weapon used for slaughtering cattle, then headed toward Mary's house. At the time, Mary was resting with her children, completely unaware of the impending danger. Around midnight, John arrived at her house, standing near the back door. He used the axe to break in, then threw it in the kitchen. He proceeded to locate the fuse box, which he knew from previous visits, and cut off the electricity to the entire house. With the power out, he climbed the stairs to the second floor. Mary was asleep in her room with her 10-year-old daughter but woke up when she heard someone entering. Confused, she tried to turn on the light and realized it wasn't working. In a moment of terror, she recognized who the intruder must be. Before she could act, John attacked her. He began hitting her and dragged her out of the bed onto the floor, where he pinned her down and started choking her. The commotion woke up all the children in the house. They tried to resist John, but he was much stronger than they were. He injured 2 children and attacked Mary, aiming for her chest. She managed to dodge, but the bullet hit her shoulder, leaving her wounded. This escalated into a desperate fight for survival. Despite her injury, she fought back with all her strength. Realizing she couldn't overpower him, she decided to reach the street, hoping to draw him away from the children and call for help. Mary's 2 daughters were injured and unable to resist any longer, and Mary tried her best to protect them. John attempted to strangle her but failed. Injured and desperate, she struggled to make her way to the front door. She managed to run down the stairs and out onto the street, screaming for help. Her cries caught the attention of the neighbors, who began coming outside to see what was going on. Several witnesses saw John holding a weapon, which he pointed at Mary's chest as she stood terrified. In front of everyone, including children, he attacked twice. Among the neighbors was an off-duty policeman who had been at home resting. The officer approached John, trying to calm him down and reason with him. Without hesitation, he aimed the weapon at the officer, threatening to attack. Unarmed, the policeman raised his hands and retreated, a move that likely saved his life. Afterward, John struck Mary's youngest daughter and fled the scene. Among the neighbors were doctors who attempted to assist Mary while waiting for an ambulance, but tragically, their efforts were in vain. She passed away. 2 of her daughters required hospital treatment, though their injuries were not severe, at least physically. Thankfully, the situation did not escalate to the worst-case scenario. Later, it was revealed that John's original plan was not to harm Mary but to target her children. However, his plan didn't go as intended. He had also planned to take his own life in Mary's home to ensure she lived with the resulting trauma. He shared this sinister plan with a friend through a messaging app, explaining that this was his idea of revenge for Mary breaking his heart. Sadly, the friend dismissed these remarks and did not intervene, merely advising John to return to his wife and calm down. After attacking Mary, John immediately wrote to the same friend and confessed what he had done. He was later found bleeding near the house where he had been living for the past few weeks. Upon returning to the house, he attempted to end his life by cutting his wrist but was rescued in time. After regaining consciousness, he claimed to experience memory lapses. He stated that he recalled multiple attempts to end his life, including one just before his arrest. John told the police about his relationship with Mary, describing how she had rejected and betrayed him. Vaguely, he remembered fragments of their fight and the attack, but most of his memories were missing. While it appeared that he may have been in a state of emotional distress, the detectives believed he was feigning mental health issues to avoid responsibility for his actions. Their suspicions were reinforced by evidence that John had carefully planned the crime. He had shared the plan with a friend, said goodbye to his ex-wife, and even contacted the authorities beforehand to delay their arrival. John took weapons from the farm where he worked and spent additional time at the fitness center prior to committing the crime. This further demonstrates that his actions were intentional, in contrast to those of individuals suffering from severe mental illnesses. Predictably, the defense attorney argued that John suffered from a mental disorder and had endured a difficult childhood. Following this argument, John was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed that he had a severe form of depressive disorder. Despite receiving this diagnosis, he did not admit guilt, claiming that he could not remember anything. Initially, the prosecution aimed to prove premeditated murder in court, but this course of action was eventually deemed unnecessary. After assessing all relevant factors, John's lawyer advised him to accept responsibility. John changed his testimony and pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, although he maintained that much of what had occurred was beyond his memory. For Mary's family, this confession brought some degree of relief. Nevertheless, they were compelled to endure the hearing, during which they agonizingly learned the harrowing details of Mary's final moments. John McFarlane received a sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Typically, parole for such crimes is not considered until after 30 years. However, the court reduced the minimum term to 20 years, citing confirmed mental health issues as a mitigating factor. Mary's family was outraged that the court had considered John's mental health as justification for a reduced sentence. They strongly believed that John deserved a far harsher punishment, arguing that he not only killed Mary but also posed a serious threat to others, including her children. In their view, John should remain isolated from society permanently. The family testified to John's obsessive and dangerous behavior, presenting evidence that he had initially planned to harm the children. Ultimately, it appeared that Mary's desperate struggle with John had diverted his attention away from the children, but at the cost of her own life. Due to the persistent efforts of Mary's family, the case was reviewed. As a result, John's minimum sentence of 20 years was increased to the standard 30 years. Following the retrial, the senior investigator approached Mary and expressed hope that the revised decision and extended sentence would provide her greater comfort. However, the matter did not end there. Mary's children, Sophie, the youngest, turned 18, Hannah, 19, and Jessica, 22, jointly decided to pursue accountability for those they believed had contributed to John's attack. They held the police department, specifically the dispatcher, and the psychiatrist who had deemed John sane and failed to mandate psychiatric treatment, responsible for their perceived negligence. They argued that if the danger posed by John had been fully understood, Mary might still be alive. This seemed logical, as even a brief conversation with a psychiatrist, who had evaluated John after his arrest, reportedly revealed signs of mental illness. Serious psychological issues had clearly been overlooked, and it remained unclear why 2 previous hospital tests had failed to detect similar problems. It became evident that the response to calls placed by Mary and her friend, made only half an hour apart, was inadequate. The dispatcher underestimated the severity of the situation, which they believed to be the main reason the police failed to respond in time to prevent the tragedy. This failure prompted revisions to several regulations aimed at improving threat detection and enhancing police procedures. It was decided that law enforcement officers had fulfilled everything correctly within the regulations. However, Sophie, Hannah, and Jessica do not lose hope that their efforts were not in vain and that this will at least help save the lives of other victims. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Clelia Medina. Early in the morning on Sunday, February 17, 2008, a man was walking with his dog when he suddenly noticed that the dog was attracted to something strange on the ground. Looking closely, he realized it was a series of drops forming a path. He began to follow them, moving parallel to the canal, not far from Lambersart, France. The drops continued, leading him to the very shore where he noticed a body half submerged in the water. It was swollen and very pale. The man immediately reported it to the police. In the name of law enforcement, forensic experts began to carefully examine the area and the body itself. However, there was nothing that could help identify the female victim. It was not possible to find a handbag that might have contained documents, a mobile phone, or bank cards. The body was taken for an autopsy, and the police continued to investigate the area around the canal for any clues about the identity of the victim. While the medical examiner was working in his office, detectives checked the databases of missing persons to find anything that could help identify the body. In this area, no recent disappearances had been recorded. When it became obvious that the unidentified victim could not be recognized, forensic scientists began searching the canal bank for clues indicating the identity of the deceased or the perpetrator. In the relatively small area where the body was found, cigarette butts and anything that could contain human DNA were collected. To ensure that nothing was missed, a team of divers was called in to check the bottom of the canal. This decision turned out to be correct. One diver managed to retrieve a car jack from the bottom, found just a meter away from the body. The jack, belonging to a standard set for a wing car, had a serial number indicating it was used in a vehicle produced in 1997. It had been in the water for quite a long time, so traces from its surface could have washed away. However, during the examination, human bloodstains were found. They continued to collect data. Initially, it was believed that the victim had been strangled, as characteristic marks remained on her neck. However, the forensic expert concluded that the cause of death was multiple strong blows to the head with a blunt object. The location and shape of the marks resembled those made by a car jack. There were suggestions that the girl could have died in a road accident, but the longer they attempted to prove this, the less plausible the theory seemed. It was soon decided to abandon this idea. It clearly indicated a methodical beating after which the body was simply thrown into the water. A toxicological examination showed that the victim was either intoxicated from alcohol or under the influence of prohibited substances. The deceased was fully dressed, and no signs of abuse were found. At the same time, there were no marks on her hands that would indicate she had fought for her life. The attack had likely come as a surprise to her, and she was unable to defend herself. According to the forensic expert, she died around 5 a.m. The police had only one clue that could help solve the mystery of her identity: a small stamp on her palm that had miraculously not washed away in the water. Such stamps are given to club visitors at the entrance, allowing security to recognize them without the need to check passes or flyers. Typically, these stamps are unique to each establishment and are not replicated. It was quickly discovered that the victim had visited the Buccaneer Club located nearby shortly before her death. Detectives arrived at the club, immediately spoke with the administration and employees, providing them with a description of the deceased. Two young men recognized the girl because she occasionally attended the disco, but no one knew her name. The detectives managed to access the recordings from the CCTV cameras. Thanks to that, the victim was identified. She had arrived at the club the day before she was found in the canal, apparently leaving Buccaneer around 3 a.m. and being killed by 5 a.m. What happened to her between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. remained unknown. The police spoke to regular patrons and staff in the hope that someone recognized her from the CCTV footage, but no valuable clues about her identity emerged. So far, no missing persons reports had been filed. The police were left with only one option to identify the deceased: to hold a press conference and appeal to the public through the media. Detectives provided a detailed description of the victim and showed footage from the club's CCTV cameras. Within a few hours, a woman admitting that she was the mother of 18-year-old Clelia Medina. She reported that her daughter had gone to the club about a day before these events and had not returned or been in touch. She immediately became concerned. Relatives and friends had no idea where Clelia might have spent the night. No one had seen Clelia after visiting the club, which caused anxiety and prompted her mother to search for her. Approximately 36 hours had passed when she managed to contact the local police station in Lille, but received the standard excuse that law enforcement officers did not want to waste time looking for a girl who had simply gone on a spree after the club and was likely spending time with friends or a boyfriend. When she saw a news program about the police announcing the discovery of a body and the terrible circumstances surrounding the tragedy, she initially tried to dismiss any bad thoughts about it possibly being her daughter. However, the worry persisted. She literally felt that something bad had happened to her daughter and feared that it was Clelia's body that had been found in the canal. She acted extremely worried and was very agitated, providing somewhat confused information due to her emotional state. Therefore, the police decided to verify the information with Clelia's cousin, who had been with Clelia that evening. The young man confirmed some of the details provided by Clelia's mother. He helped to clarify valuable information such as the clothing and piercing locations that Clelia had. The victim's identity was almost completely matched. Clelia's mother was notified of the coincidence and was invited to identify the body. All doubts were finally dispelled. The mother was shocked by her daughter's tragic death, and she immediately began to cry. She struggled to understand who could have done this, as her daughter was an ordinary girl who did not associate with problematic people. According to her cousin, they had planned to go to Buccaneer Club together, the seal of which was found on her hand. He described his relationship with Clelia as very friendly and warm. They communicated well, supported each other. That evening, everyone was in good spirits. From the very beginning, Clelia's mother had been worried about her daughter attending the party. She felt strongly that Clelia should not go. To calm her mother, Clelia explained that they would not be walking home alone and that everything would be fine. Despite the fact that her cousin took her to the club, he did not intend to stay there long. Clelia managed to reassure her mother by telling her that her ex-boyfriend, 19-year-old Julian Saley, was supposed to drive her home. The whole family knew him well and trusted him. Julian Saley and Clelia had been in a relationship for about a year, which had ended a couple of months before Clelia's death. As Clelia's mother noted, even after the breakup, they continued to communicate as friends. Law enforcement officers decided to check the records of telephone conversations, which verified that Clelia had indeed called her ex-boyfriend when she left the club. However, the police did not have time to visit his home, as he came to the station on his own initiative to talk to the investigators. Julian was eager to help because he was worried about what had happened. In his statement, he emphasized that Clelia had contacted him after he left the cinema. He promptly went to the club, where he picked her up in his car in the parking lot. They spent some time together at his house, but at about 4:30 in the morning, Clelia headed home. Julian believed that she could have been attacked during this time. The police immediately questioned why he did not drive Clelia home at such a late hour. He explained that it was only a short walk left to get home, as the houses were located close together. It was already getting light, he was very tired and drunk, so cannot take her home. Clelia herself did not want to impose on anyone and was not afraid for her safety. Unfortunately, Julian simply went to bed and turned off his mobile phone to avoid being disturbed. Until he woke up, he could not reach Clelia but did not think much of it, believing that she could be spending time with someone new, as there was no romantic relationship between them anymore. However, upon learning about the tragedy in the Medina family, Julian felt compelled to help with the investigation, so provided his testimony. The detectives, however, immediately suspected that he might not just want to help. Such behavior is often seen in murderers attempting to divert suspicion from themselves. Thus, they decided not to let him leave too quickly, hoping he would either incriminate himself or provide genuine assistance in the investigation. Suspicion grew stronger as Julian reacted very calmly to the details of the crime. He did not show any emotions when looking at the disfigured image, and he appeared neither upset nor shocked. His lack of reaction to the details of his ex-girlfriend's death combined with the fact that he was the last person to see her, made him a person of interest to the detectives. It is known that in such cases, exes are often involved, who kill out of jealousy, resentment, or revenge. To establish or refute this, the investigators asked Julian to show them his car. The detective specifically did not mention the jack that had been found in the canal. He agreed to this request without hesitation. According to his confession, he arrived at the police station in the same car in which he had driven Clelia from the club to his home. The policeman went out into the street with him, and in the parking lot, they found a notch indicating the year of manufacture of the car matched the jack. As soon as the door was opened, they felt a very strong smell of cleaning products. The interior was excessively clean for a young guy. It seemed that a very thorough cleaning had been carried out recently. Nevertheless, Julian immediately justified himself by saying that he had bought a new car only 10 days prior, and the previous owner had cleaned it well before selling it. The police were most interested in the possibility of blood being present. Perhaps Julian could have attacked Clelia in his car or transported the body after the attack. When the mat in the trunk was lifted, they found several suspicious dark red drops that were collected for further analysis. However, none of these stains belonged to Clelia. Nevertheless, Julian continued to be considered the main suspect. It was believed that this was an attack based on passion, so the killer must have known the victim well. Furthermore, the make of the car matched the jack. The jack was found at the bottom of the canal. Julian seemed ideal as a suspect based on all the criteria. After, they found one valuable clue, a blood stain on one of Julian's sneakers. After examination, it was possible to prove that the blood belonged to Clelia, but it was not possible to date it with precision. Julian insisted that the stain appeared by chance when Clelia had a nosebleed about a month before the tragedy. However, his words could not be confirmed or refuted, so this evidence turned out to be indirect. Even Clelia's family was sure that Julian could not have done this. He had always been a very nice guy. Clelia's mother believed wholeheartedly that he was not capable of murder. She commented that Clelia was almost crazy about Julian based on his appearance. He was very kind, loving, and gave Clelia many gifts. However, their relationship was not entirely smooth. They often argued. Julian as an accomplished young man for his age. He grew up in a strict but loving family in Lille, France. From an early age, he was interested in sports, especially football, which he played with his father. He was not prone to violence and avoided fights, despite being in perfect shape. However, he was forced to drop out of school because of football, wanting to build a sports career, and simply chose training over textbooks. His parents supported their son's decision, especially since he was mature enough for his age. At the same time, they described him as charming but very jealous. They mentioned that he could become upset over a random photo of a stranger on the internet that Clelia was looking at. As their relationship progressed, Julian became more and more jealous. Due to such tumultuous dynamics, they eventually broke up. Despite the tensions, they continued to maintain friendly relations, and everything seemed normal. Except for the circumstantial evidence against Julian, there was no concrete proof. He was released pending further investigation. Then, Julian was arrested and charged with Clelia's murder. He spent about a year in prison, but his lawyer managed to get him released before his trial. Julian repeatedly appealed, claiming there was insufficient evidence to convict him, and was released on bail. However, this lasted until 2011, when his formal trial began. A rather controversial trial lay ahead. From the very beginning, the situation was tense, partly because Clelia's family had changed their opinion about Julian over the lengthy investigation period. They became convinced, based on several dubious facts, that the deceased's ex-boyfriend was indeed a criminal. Clelia's family now demanded punishment for the supposed killer. At this stage, it was necessary to assess the mental health of the suspect. In June 2008, Julian was visited by an expert psychiatrist, who noted no deviations. Julian willingly made contact and described in detail the events related to Clelia. He admitted that there had indeed been several conflicts which ended in slaps to the face. Although he did not think this was normal, he justified himself, citing jealousy regarding Clelia and claiming that she had stolen from him multiple times. After the examination, the specialist concluded that Julian was completely in his right mind and capable of appearing in court. Tension was literally in the air. The defense team escalated the situation to the point where a fight broke out right in the courtroom. Several people were slightly injured, so the trial was postponed because of this unpleasant incident and the subsequent bureaucratic red tape. Everything was delayed for another year until 2012. From February 2009 until the start of the trial in June 2012, Julian lived with his paternal aunts near Paris. She immediately noticed how angry he was. At first, they thought it was connected to the slander against him. However, his discontent grew as the trial approached. Meanwhile, the Medina family accused Julian's lawyer of unnecessarily dragging out the proceedings, which only heightened tensions. The first witnesses began to speak at the meetings. There was a mutual friend of Clelia and Julian who recalled that all three of them had once been driving in a car together after their romantic relationship had ended. Julian had even started dating a new girl, who happened to be one of Clelia's close friends. This situation made she very upset and jealous. Despite their breakup, a conflict ensued between them, which even escalated to physical confrontation. They exchanged blows. At one point, Clelia even attempted to jump out of the moving car, but Julian managed to pull her back inside. By the time the car reached her friend's house, Clelia finally exited and continued yelling at Julian from the street. He tried to calm her down, but she simply waved her hand dismissively and left the scene. This friend was convinced this was not an isolated incident, as outbursts of jealousy and aggression were repeated throughout their relationship. In addition to this event, Clelia's parents recalled several instances during family vacations with Julian where he lost control. They once caught him walking around the apartment with a weapon. However, he had managed to convince Clelia's relatives that it was just a failed joke. They now understood the situation was much more serious. From the very beginning, Clelia had been in great danger. Another friend of Julian recounted an incident where, in a fit of rage, he began to choke one of his girlfriends. The once pleasant, sociable, and good-natured Julian was now portrayed as a monster capable of losing control at any moment. So, the change in the Medina family's attitude toward him did not seem strange. Julian had lied about the time. He told the police that Clelia left his house at 4:30 a.m. Detectives managed to track their mobile phones and prove that they were still together at 5 a.m., which is when Clelia was believed to have died. Subsequently, Clelia's phone unexpectedly turned off at 5:10 a.m. Previously, during an interrogation, Julian said that attempted to contact Clelia again but could not get a response. Detectives believed the call to his ex-girlfriend was made intentionally to create an alibi. Shortly thereafter, Julian's phone also turned off for several hours. Investigators suspected he deliberately turned off his devices to avoid being tracked. Despite all the circumstantial evidence against him, Julian continued to insist on his innocence. His lawyer argued that none of this evidence proved his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Throughout the investigation, detectives tried to extract a confession from Julian, but he steadfastly maintained his innocence. The pressure from authorities led him to feel embittered. He claimed that the persecution caused him to face difficulties in real life and to suffer from insults, unfounded accusations. Phone records revealed something intriguing. Julian's new girlfriend also tried to contact Clelia shortly before the murder. At first, she did not disclose any details as to why she tried to contact Clelia at all. However, in 2011, the girl spoke to detectives and made a rather dubious statement. According to her, she felt guilty that Clelia was dead. The reason for her fears stemmed from the fact that, as a close friend of Clelia, she was dating Julian. This clearly caused great discontent for his ex-girlfriend, who took every opportunity to contact him. On that fateful night, Julian's new girlfriend decided to act on her feelings. She did not like Clelia as such attention directed at the guy. She believed that this was the impetus for another conflict between the exes, which ended tragically. When the police received this statement, they were puzzled and decided to explore this new details. The application ended up at the station, and detectives tried to find out if it was possible that she was an accomplice. They insisted that Julian's new girlfriend may have unintentionally provoked the attack but did not pursue such a goal intentionally. According to her, she had been afraid to admit it because she feared her boyfriend's reaction. The neck of the deceased showed clear signs of strangulation, as if her throat had been squeezed with bare hands. Apparently, the victim could not have been killed in this way, so the criminal used a metal jack from the car. Although it was inconvenient, it quickly became the instrument that ended the innocent girl's life. The killer inflicted a large number of blows to her head and face, which proved fatal. The degree of cruelty was astounding. He broke her facial bones. The prosecutor addressed the jury, stating that leaving such a dangerous person at large was a crime. Despite the circumstantial nature of the evidence, the prosecution managed to prove the defendant's guilt. The prosecution's witnesses appeared scared as they recounted their experiences with the real Julian. The jury found Julian Saley guilty of premeditated murder. As he left the courtroom, he turned to the victim's family and said something that sounded like a threat. From the very moment Julian found himself behind bars, he began writing endless appeals to challenge the sentence, insisting that he was a victim of bias and incompetence. Probably feeling his helplessness and unbearable situation, he even insulted one of the judges in writing, subsequently refusing to retract his comments, insisting he was a victim of governmental arbitrariness. However, all his requests were rejected. While in prison, he was involved in another incident related to his inability to control his aggression. Using a homemade sharpener, he threatened to kill one of the prison guards, whom he took hostage for several minutes. Julian was eventually overpowered and neutralized. Now, he remains behind bars.